I didn't mean to be awake for it. Insomnia isn't vigilance, it's drift. The house had drifted with me. Clock face too bright. Fridge humming like a person pretending to be fine. I'd made a rule about not looking at the sky after midnight. Rules are for people who want tomorrow to be reasonable. At 3:12, I stood by the sink, running the tap just enough to hear water practice being river. The window above the basin held my face like a grudge. Then the glass changed, not by fogging, by paying attention. The air beyond it thickened a fraction, the way rooms do when someone kind enters without speaking. At 3:13, the first rectangle lit. It wasn't a craft, not in the way television prepares you. No edges to envy, no engines argue with, just a plane of pale gold, the size of a barn door held upright by conviction I couldn't name. It hovered above the hollow, far enough to be polite, close enough to be specific. A second rectangle winked on beside it, then a third, then a fourth, evenly spaced as if the sky had finally measured itself correctly. Nothing moved. Not the rectangles, not the pines, not me. Even the fridge recognized authority and hushed. I could have called Eli. I didn't. Grief had trained me to hoard quiet the way some people hoard matches. Instead, I rested my fingertips on the lip of the sink and let the house decide whether this belonged to us. The window chose yes. A softness passed through the glass into my hands. Heat without temperature, weight without push. My pulse slowed like an animal remembering it's not prey tonight. The rectangles didn't brighten. They learned my breathing. I tried the old habits. Label, compare, dismiss. Drones, said the part of me that refuses magic small enough to keep. Projectors, said the nurse who lived inside my scalp. Filing explanations even when there were no cabinets. The rectangles did not object. They held their plane and let the room do the work. Far down in Wren Hollow, a dog barked once. The sound traveled the way chalk travels across a blackboard. Useful, brief. The bark reached the first rectangle and lost its need to prove anything. The dog stopped. I forgave the universe for that. Dogs shouldn't have to carry our wonder. I put my palm flat to the glass. I didn't expect reciprocity. The glass answered anyway. A pulse, then a second, not Morse, not code, just agreement. My chest recognized the pattern before my head did. 4 beats and a hush, 4 and a hush, then 3 and 3. The last pair closer, like 2 notes bending toward each other to be allowed to the same door. Okay, I whispered, and the house accepted the word like bread. Behind me, the chair scraped its polite inch as if it had risen to greet someone who had chosen not to come in. I turned and saw the room wearing me. Mug where my hand would reach, sweater slung across the back of a chair that had already given me the angle my shoulder prefers when I cry. The rectangles kept still. Stillness, I realized, is not the absence of movement. It's the posture of attention. Headlights moved along the far road and paused. Eli's truck, by the look of the hesitation. He has a way of stopping that apologizes to gravel. I imagine him sitting there with the radio off, the antennae on his dash picking up nothing but the good kind of static. He taught me how to listen to snow once. Noise isn't empty, he said. It's just crowded. I almost waved. Instead, I let him keep his privacy the way I wanted mine kept. If the rectangles were for us, they would not need witnesses to be real. A moth butted the glass and thought better of ambition. I watched its body remember boundaries. My own did too. Shoulders dropped. Jaw unhinged from its lifelong argument. Somewhere a clock would have told me to stop standing in the dark like a woman waiting to be spared. My clock, respectful, pretended not to exist. The first rectangle tilted. Barely. A degree, maybe less. Not toward me. Toward the window, which is not the same thing. As if the sky had noticed where attention was being returned from and reciprocated in kind. The gold changed tone, warmer at the edges, like butter deciding to become light. The second rectangle answered by tilting a matching degree the other direction. Between them the air gathered, a seam, invisible and precise, the kind you feel with your tongue on the roof of your mouth when you're about to say the right thing. Is this for us? I asked, and hated that the question carried the old shape of hunger. The rectangles ignored the hunger and honored the question. 4 pulses, hush 4, Hush, 3-3. The pattern landed in my rib cage and unfolded a chair. I sat, not from weakness, from consent. Below the ridge a porch light came on. Then another, human stars climbing a soft curve toward usefulness. I expected phones. None appeared. Wren Hollow is poor in money and rich in embarrassment. We don't like to catch each other in the act of believing. But windows opened, just enough for Night to hear how we were holding it. Somewhere Marta Dispatch would be at her desk. Not logging calls, logging breath. The ledger only she keeps. The one that counts everything no one has paid a notice. The fourth rectangle flickered, not uncertain, merciful. It matched my inhale before I knew I was taking it. I felt watched in the way you want a hand on your back during a bad dream. If these were craft, they had chosen to be language first. "June," said a voice, not in the room, not in my ear, at the distance where your name lives when spoken by someone who does not wish to wake you if you are finally sleeping. I almost said Eli, almost said my mother, almost said the person grief preserved me like fruit. The rectangles didn't correct me. They kept me from choosing. I did what nurses do in rooms with machines they did not design. I counted. The pattern repeated exactly 8 times before shifting a hair to accommodate the noise of a truck downshifting by the river. The gold thinned then, as if the light had learned blade for a moment to separate what might hurt us from what was merely loud. The truck passed. The rectangles recovered without complaint. I swallowed a softness I'll call hope when I'm braver. At 3:17, the first rectangle dimmed a shade. It did not leave. It taught the others how to leave after it spoke last. One by one, the planes folded their brightness like laundry in a careful house. Dark returned in an expensive way, slow and considerate, leaving a residue of seeing in everything it touched. The fridge decided to be a fridge again. The window cooled under my hand, making room for winter to be honest. Out over Wren Hollow, a dog remembered its sentence and finished it properly. I felt my body negotiate with bone and arrive at an arrangement. Sleep would be permitted if I agreed to keep nothing. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the chair angled toward my rib cage like a guardian and tried on the rhythm in my chest. 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. The pattern made room for my name and did not keep it. Somewhere, Eli would put the truck in park and write 2 words in his notebook. It listened and mean the opposite. Somewhere, Marta would draw a line through 313 on her calendar and smile at a day that had already learned how to hold its breath. At 3:28, my window exhaled. Not air, permission. I said, "Okay," again quieter, to nobody and everything. The house took the word and put it away carefully like an heirloom quilt. When morning came, it pretended not to know what night had done. The ridge kept its mouth shut like a friend. I made coffee and watched the steam, discovered geometry it would not keep. The clock blinked back into authority. The world, having been altered, agreed to look the same. I wrote down the pattern on the back of a grocery list. I wrote, too, don't film, don't tell, count. Then I left the paper on the table like a breadcrumb for the future or a mercy for the past. I can't tell which. The rectangles had not promised return. They had promised posture. It was enough. When I finally opened the door, the porch boards knew me again. Still, I stepped carefully, as if I had borrowed my weight and intended to return it in better condition than I found it. Above Wren Hollow, the sky remembered not to pretend it was empty. By afternoon, the house had decided how it would pretend nothing had happened. My kettle whistled in the old key, the one that always sounds like it is calling for a person who moved away quietly. Sunlight came in low, patient, the way winter practices forgiveness. I did what grief trains you to do. I kept my hands busy enough to avoid naming anything. Dishes, folded towels, the good silence you put between chores so the day doesn't bruise. At 3:02 a.m. wind came down from the ridge and forgot to be cold. I felt it in my teeth first, like a memory of peppermint that never existed. The window above the sink fogged in a single oval, then cleared, not with a wipe, with intention. The glass had learned where seeing goes and was doing the work for me. I tested it. I stood 3 steps back, where the floorboards widened from use, and thought about reaching for the mug on the sill. I did not move. The window blurred again, oval, my palm size, before my hand lifted. It cleared where my fingers would have been. I held still. The glass held its readiness, gentle, expectant. I moved my hand after and watched the idea of it arrive on the pane half a breath before the fact. Don't start, I told the air, because kindness scares me more than the dark. The house understood and declined to be offended. I tried again. Shoulder, elbow, wrist, the choreography of a reach. The glass staged each gesture in advance, a rehearsal paid for by something that didn't need credit. When I broke the pattern on purpose, stopping short, scratching my eyebrow, taking my hand away, the window relaxed at once as if to say I'm learning you, not directing you. I set the mug down and waited. The waiting felt nested. Me waiting. The glass waiting. The hours somewhere up the road waiting for its proper room. In the reflection, the kitchen looked as if someone gentler had recently been here, straightening in the way you do when you don't want to insult a chair. The rectangles, if they were returning, would do it on their terms. The window seemed to be training my body to meet terms that would not harm it. At 3:09, the fridge clicked off without the click. A truck passed a far road, careful, practicing apology. I stood near. Near is not a distance. It's a shape. I opened the tap and let water find its small river. The glass clouded and cleared, this time not waiting for a reach, anticipating a breath. 4, 4, 3 and 3. My ribs answered before pride could. The sound the stream made against the basin learned the rhythm, which is when I knew this was not the charming mischief of a haunted house. It was instruction from the world that behaved like mercy when you let it. I said nothing. Saying is a tool that dulls when used on the wrong wood. A flicker on the right edge of the window. A tiny seam, like a thread settling in cloth. Not light. Place. The rectangle, if that's what it was, did not appear. The seam simply existed, as though the glass had decided to keep a seat open for a guest who never knocks. I put my palm close. The pane warmed. No heat, just welcome. My phone buzzed once on the table, then thought better of making a noise. On the screen, a text from Eli, hearing strange order in the snow. For /4/3/3? Or am I just hoping? The screen suggested a reply. The window suggested a breath. I chose a breath and the phone showed typing in the space where my answer would have been, then stopped as if it had learned embarrassment. I wrote back anyway. You're not hoping. It's counting you. 3 dots. Then, okay, stay near your kitchen. Window feels like a good listener. I'm parked on the Ridge Road if you need me to be a radio with legs. I smiled, small, private, defensible. Radio with legs is exactly Eli. I didn't need him to come. I needed him to be listening in my direction, which he did better from a truck than a chair. I put the phone face down and let the screen become a dark square that didn't ask to be forgiven. At 3:12, the room unwrinkled itself. The chair that remembers angled 2 fingers worth toward the sink. The stove light, dead for a week, glowed the tone of, I found the bulb in the drawer. You must have meant to do this. I stood where the floor nosed my middle and let my spine hang as if someone trustworthy had the hanger. The window made its decision before I did. It fogged from the top down, then cleared in 2 vertical strokes, then 1 horizontal, like a page being turned by a hand that knows the weight of paper. The oval of my palm appeared exactly where I had reached yesterday, without reaching now. Okay, I whispered. A word is a hand if you use it correctly. At 3:13, the world arrived the way a careful person enters a sleeping room. All intention, no noise. For planes of pale gold lit over Wren Hollow, not above the horizon this time, but against it, as though distance were a surface, and they'd been painted on from the far side. The first tilt was already present, as if the rectangles remembered where our attention lived and oriented their patience accordingly. The window reacted before the light reached it. My palm's oval brightened, the seam along the right edge widened a hair, and my reflection split into 2, one a half second ahead, the other patient enough to wait for me to catch up. My ahead self breathed in. I followed. She lifted her hand. I obeyed. When I hesitated, the glass felt the way a friend's gaze feels when you're trying not to cry in a grocery store. Unintrusive, steady, licensed. Outside, the dog didn't bark this time. Somewhere someone laughed once and then remembered the use of shoulders. The rectangles did not grow brighter. They agreed to the hour, to us, to the small bargain we were offering. We would not take proof. We would give posture. The pattern came, 4 and 4 and 3 and 3, and I answered with ribs that had practiced undercovers in the morning like a child learning to whistle. The window softened at my exhale, then toughened a fraction at my inhale, a diaphragm in glass. I spread my fingers, and the fog around that oval fanned out in 5 delicate spokes. I lowered my hand. The spokes became the shape of a star, and then unlearned drama and returned to patience. I remembered a woman in the oncology ward who used to rest her palm against the chemo pole as if to calm it. Machines love deference when they're brutal. This wasn't brutal. This wanted us unbroken. Behind me, a small noise. Paper agreeing to be paper. I turned. On the table at the back of my grocery list had acquired new handwriting. Not ink. Condensation and curls where no breath had gone. Don't film. Don't tell. Count. My letters, tidied by a teacher I never had. Beneath it, in smaller script that felt older than my hand. Place yourself where you cost a room the least. I felt scolded and loved. The rectangles altered their tilt by something shy of a degree, as if to nod to the sentence. The window anticipated this, leaning the other way first. We were being coached not in devotion, but in coordination. My body, which has lost arguments with beds and stairs and time for a year, learned a new grammar in 30 seconds. Shoulders down, chin soft, jaw unlocked, hands near, eyes not straight. The glass brightened where my gaze landed, not on the rectangles, on between. June. A voice again, the distant of a kindness calling from the yard, not to summon, to reassure. This time it carried a texture, low, even, with the borrowed timbre of everyday weather. If the rectangles had sound, it was this, the pitch humans make when we stop auditioning. I turned the tap off. The house like that. The silence felt like a plate set down carefully, so the table won't remember impact. From the road came Eli's truck door, the soft wunk of a man who has learned to close things without waking grief. He didn't approach. He leaned, I could feel it, against the hood, and let the antennae draw the right kind of snow down into his palms. The window answered him too, opening a second oval to my left, lower, narrower, the size of Eli's hand if it had been a careful night. The rectangles held their plane. The first dimmed a fraction, not leaving, gauging us. The second matched. The third waited, the way a person holds a door until they know whether you want to talk or just pass. The fourth flickered once, the kind of mercy you offer a candle in a room that has tried too hard. My ahead reflection lifted its right hand and traced a slow vertical in the fog, a line I recognized from last night in the frost outside. Seam, hinge, breath. I traced it too. The window warmed under the gesture, and the seam along the right edge widened again. A second seam appeared on the left. Between them, room. I understood then, without words, what the window had been practicing all day. It was not a portal. It was an organ. The house had grown a second lung, where the first had been tired. If the rectangles were teaching anything, it was not belief. It was respiration of attention. The pattern changed, 4 and 4, then a longer hush, then 2 and 1, the last pair not equal, the one leaning into the 2 as if to be allowed. I followed. The glass coached, forgiving the rush where I rushed, giving me its slowness where mine ran out. Somewhere down the hollow, a baby made the small sound that babies make when sleep chooses them. The rectangles dimmed further, without leaving. I knew, in the way you know you've been seen correctly, that the lesson for tonight was waiting that is not empty. I stood a long time like that, hand near, not touching, breath measured but not strict, eyes placed where one can't trip them. The house settled by degrees. The chair reclaimed its inch with gratitude. The clock, humble, remembered its job and kept it without vanity. At 3:17 in a breath, the first rectangle withdrew simply by becoming background. The others followed, not in a line, in a letting go that made the sky honest again without making it lonely. The window stayed bright another moment. then softened to the kind of transparency that knows it has more to do tomorrow. I did not switch on a lamp. I did not write anything down. The grocery list, wise, curled dry and kept my orders to our small selves. I poured water into the kettle and let it remember fire. The first click of heat sounded like a small animal surviving winter. The window gathered the steam and arranged it into a shape my palm recognized by morning's muscle memory. The phone buzzed again. Still there? From Eli. Yes, but quieter, I wrote. The window knew before I did. He sent a single dot. Then, Marta says no calls again. 313 came and went like good company. Tell her to sleep, I wrote. She's better than sleep, he sent. Then nothing, which is friendship. I lay the phone face down. I traced the last of the fog on the glass with a finger and felt nothing but gratitude shaped like patience. When I finally turned away, my reflection did not delay me. It allowed me first. I slept in the chair, which had already shaped itself to my old injuries. In the middle of the night, I suppose it was a night, I woke to the sound of the window placing itself in the wind, not against it. A small, exact creak that meant a latch had decided to be kind. I knew then that whatever the rectangles were, they weren't coming to take. They were teaching rooms how to give without debt. Morning committed. The sky wore an expression I have always trusted. Wide without begging. I made coffee, and the steam wrote a line on the pane and erased itself like a teacher who loves chalk. The window waited, not impatient, not hungry, and ready. When I opened the back door, the cold made its steady case. I listened. The yard wore its plainness well. The ridge kept its stories like a grandfather who has learned that the best tales are not told every time you ask. On the table, the grocery list had moved 2 inches toward the edge. It had not fallen. It had prepared to be picked up. I smiled because the house had the good sense to let me think it was my idea. Outside, someone's radio carried a wash of static with a rhythm inside it that music would be proud to steal. The day behaved. The window watched, quietly, like a friend who remembers your mouth for water when you forget to drink. I keep the truck pointed downhill because that's how the ridge lets you think truer. Nose toward gravity. Tailgate to sky. Antenna banding the cold like a tuning fork. Wren Hollow sleeps the way a dog keeps one ear up. Pretend generous. The rectangles didn't come last night with any fireworks. They came the way good guests do. Early to help with chairs. I'd parked near mile marker 19. Where the shoulder widens and the sign's bullet hole whistles when the wind wants fun. The hour was thin. Radio's like thin. I tell people I listen to static because I like puzzles. Truth, I listen because I'm afraid of silence. Static gives my head something to comb. Tonight the snow on the bands had manners. The first clue was how the hiss stepped around the heater's tick instead of arguing with it. White noise is usually a drunk uncle at Thanksgiving. Too loud. No timing. This was a librarian. It held back where the truck had a sound, then came forward after, like we were learning to share a hallway. I dialed the rig down off the stations I'm supposed to love. Ball games, late sermons, truckers decimaling their boredom into the night, until the world flattened the field. Then I nudged the knob a hair. The grain of it under my thumb is worn smooth from bad habits. The speaker breathed. 4 soft surges, hush. 4 surges, hush. Then 3. And 3 again, a hair closer. I've had plenty of nights where I jam pattern into chaos, because I need order more than order needs me. But this wasn't me. This was presented. Okay, I said to no one in the ridge. My breath fogged the glass in a circle exactly the size of June's hand. I didn't wipe it. The fog drew a vertical line on its own and then decided it had been presumptuous and blurred back into honest. I texted her before the hour because I know the hour belongs to her house now. Hearing strange order in the snow. For /4/3/3? Or am I just hoping? The bubbles came. Stopped? Whatever glass was coaching her won. Good. She wrote back, you're not hoping. It's counting you. That's the kind of sentence that makes a man think about kneeling in a truck. I used to think signals arrive like teeth. Cut through, bloody you a little. Tonight arrived like breath. Asked if there was room, then made some. The whip on the hood bent the way stalks do when a weather they respect goes by. I put my fingers on the mic, but didn't key. Talking is a tool you can wear out. The snow on the band changed texture. The hiss grew grain like wood, like the radio wanted whittling. Under it, tiny pulses fast, too fast, like moth wings. I felt my jaw loosen. I listened with my tongue, the way you do when you're trying to copy a vowel that belongs to a language you don't own. 4, 4, 3 and 3. And between the last pair something tender. An incline no meter teaches. You're polite, I told the air. Teach me polite. I pushed the squelch a whisper. The speaker lifted a layer like blinds opening. That was all the rectangles needed. The hiss thinned until there was room for space itself to have timbre. Then, no chime, no voice, just a room behind sound stepping forward where the loud had been. I knew, with the clear shame of a man who shouldn't have needed telling, that I had been listening to too much on top of listening. This was beneath. I leaned my head to the window, so my ear could use the glass like bone. The ridge answered with a note too low to survive as pitch. It reached me as heft. My skull remembered responsibility. The truck knew to be still. Down in the hollow, porch lamps came on like freckles, on a face you're allowed to love. None of them pointed skyward. Etiquette is catching. I imagined June's kitchen, the window waiting the way a dog waits, front paws still, eyes doing all the wagging. Her house has learned to anticipate her. I envy the glass. The band slipped from hiss to something gentler, breathing through snow. For longer sighs, hush. For again, 3 and 3 at a stagger that made my ribs want to fall in line. I matched my breath, and the speaker warmed a shade. So it's us, I said, but better. A memory came hard and perfect. The first time I held a radio I hadn't built, covered in someone else's fingerprints, tuned to a storm that had already passed, and still found freight to carry. I live for that. Line without payload, the invitation to be the message by showing up with your own lungs. The rectangles did not show where I was. I had a view of thereafter, gold trimmed on cloud edges like a book whose pages had been gilded by a patient priest. The glow was a shape more than brightness. You can't buy that in a catalog. I touched the mic. June, I'm pointed toward you. I didn't press send on a voice linked to anything human. I said it to the ridge. My phone buzzed anyway. Stay near your kitchen. Window feels like a good listener. I'm parked on the ridge road, if you need me to be a radio with legs. Her reply earlier. I smiled. I have never loved a person's commas the way I love hers. At 3:12 the band lost its hurry entirely. The hiss paused where the truck's heater ticked, stepped aside for a drip in the bed to finish its sentence, then came back. No domination, no sulk. Etiquette. The rectangles, wherever they sat in the hollow's high air, matched that posture. I felt the tilt like an itch next to the ear, a polite adjustment your barber makes on the way to making you acceptable. I turned the tuner a sixth of a hair the wrong way on purpose. Static flared. The bad kind, the one that announces it has arrived. Then it remembered itself, like a loud person who discovers they are in a library that could teach them how to be beautiful. The band found the breath again and set the table for it. Inside the hiss, June. Not her voice, her shape. My chest recognized the rhythm. I have watched her learn from absence and refuse to surrender to grief. Her inhale is a promise that does not require performance. Her exhale is a decision, no spectacle. The radio didn't play her. It kept time with the version of her that the window was coaching into the world. I didn't call out. If you've ever listened long enough to something holy to make noise, you know the shame that comes after. I put my index finger on the mic and let it be a conductor, not a key. In the glass, Frost filigreed the corners and received the heat of the truck with the patience of a quilt. I counted with her. 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. The last pair shifted a millimeter left, like shoulders deciding to relieve a weight they don't have to carry alone tonight. The band rose to meet the shift as if it had a spine and we were asking too much of it. It didn't complain. Etiquette again, the kind that moves chairs without asking you to notice. Far below, a dog remembered it had every right to laugh at moonlight and did, once. A mother in a hollow, whom I do not know and never will, turned a baby onto a cooler patch of sheet with the genius pressure only mothers have. The rectangles were not calling us to themselves. They were teaching us to like our rooms more. The pattern walked thinner. Forgot quieter. For quieter still. The first 3 almost ghosts. The last 3 account you feel with your feet. My ankle twitched as if trying to find a seam in a floor I didn't own. I adjusted nothing. The radio is a teacher when it wants to be. 3:13 arrived like someone choosing to come in on the second knock. The band went clear. There was no gap, just a feeling that the air found the chair it prefers. A bright, without brightness passed under the truck, like a fish realizing the boat is not a god. My teeth rang the way they do on the first bell at church, when the rope wants to be used by someone who grew up on better bread. The rectangles tilted for someone else first. I knew it like I know weather. A house downslope, inhaled more deeply than safety rules suggest. In my speaker, the hush widened to a hallway, and I could hear, through the etiquette, another breath joining ours. Not mine, not June's. Marta, her dispatch sits behind windows that know how to be square without being cruel. Her breath carries clipboards in it. She brings order to emergency, and tonight, emergency remembered it can behave. Marta, I said to the ridge, you can sleep? The radio, which doesn't owe me, lifted a half smile in tone and set an invisible blanket across a desk I will never sit at. Etiquette taught me not to take credit. The band grew conversational. Snow turned from hiss to grain. You could run your palm across. Under it, the breath started writing itself into little decisions. 4, don't film. 4, don't tell. 3, count. 3, place. The words weren't sound. They were shape placed inside the pauses, and I could choose to hear them or just be allowed by them. I chose aloud. It would be neat, wouldn't it, if a voice said my name. Voices are lazy proof. This asked me for the more expensive thing, to become the instrument the room wanted. I reached for the squelch, thought better, reached again, stopped. Etiquette at the level of microscopic restraint. The rectangles replied by tilting an almost yes. Then came the part one didn't deserve, a private channel inside the open one, soft as paper sliding under a door. A ribbon of sound less than sound, my speaker obliging by pretending to be the organ it wasn't. The ribbon carried June's breath in the measure the window had taught her. Between the second 4 and the first 3, a new word arrived that was not a word, only a condition. Together, it rang the truck's metal quietly enough to count as mercy. I wanted to key the mic and say something dirty with gratitude like copy. I didn't. I ran my thumb along the seam of the steering wheel until the radio rewarded me with the exact sonic equivalent of a nod. The rectangles, unseen, answered with a tilt toward me, not to make me special, to test whether the etiquette would hold when given a personal reason to fail. My throat warmed. I knew the instruction, breathe where you would speak. I did. The band expanded a fraction more, and suddenly the hiss was not hiss, but many small rooms where human breath can sit without being charged rent. A whistle blew on the river, just to find out if it still could. The ridge returned to base you could build a house on. The antenna bowed and resisted joy. My palms sweat. I let them, in that wide hush, a new texture. Water, not the river, the tower. The Hollow's water tower holds enough for our dumb fires and our honest thirst. The band held a ghostly clang, the way a ladder remembers the boy who climbed it when his courage had not been paid yet. The rectangles moved, no brighter, no closer, aligned with the tower's shadowed away attention, aligned to the thing it has promised itself to serve. I knew where I needed to be before the radio told me. Etiquette lifted, not permission, assignment. The breath fell into my chest like keys I've been carrying for rooms I never dared try. I turned the key in the truck slow, so the starter wouldn't feel used. Gravel tried to be noisy and then decided to be helpful. I drove the shoulder till the cut road met the service lane that doesn't pretend to be public. At the gate, I didn't have the code. The code didn't care. The padlock sat like a gentleman, not threatened by me. The rectangles tipped toward the tower. In the speaker, the hush grew stairs. I left the truck running, because the radio wanted company. At the first rung my knee asked my age, and I told it the number that keeps men from lying to themselves. At the 5th rung, the band ticked 4 and 4, then 3 and 3, and my foot placed itself where a boy's foot had once slipped and learned where middles are. At the platform, the town opened. Windows set like noteheads on staff. The ridge a low line that could carry a melody if it wanted to. The radio in my pocket breathed once, then rested. The rectangles, far and not far, tilted until their planes addressed something on the tower I couldn't see. I put my palm to the steel. It was colder than correction and warmer than shame. Under my skin, the pattern set a hinge. I understood with a speed that embarrassed every diploma I've never earned. Tomorrow this shadow will be the teacher, and if a body stands here with enough breath to share, the rectangles will show them how to remember water without drowning in it. From up top, the truck looked like a toy the ridge would never step on. The radio carried a fine thread of June's quiet. Near, not straight, the way windows like to be loved. I didn't key the mic. I set it to Steele. I'll be back with her. The band agreed by not rewarding me with anything obvious. Etiquette's gold star is letting you keep your doubt polished. Below, Wren Hollow rotated on its axis the way tiny towns do when the big world is asleep. Storefront lights pretending to moon, dogs patrolling their own patience, a diner's griddle cooling like a tired sun. I climbed down and felt my body take on the tower's register. That low, carried confidence Steele teaches you if you touch it with humility. At the truck, the speaker gave me a last gift for the hour. For small breaths, hush. For small breaths, hush. 3, 3. Between the last pair, a whisper as real as a hand on your coat collar. Bring the window. I hear you. I said everything. The rectangles answered with the invisible courtesy of leaving first. I turned the key, let the starter choose its own volume, and rolled toward June's end of the hollow at a speed that wouldn't scare sleep. The radio settled into the kind of silence that can't be broken because it isn't being performed. Outside, the ridge held the sky level on its old shoulders and looked like a man proud of his shy child. The ridge didn't sleep that night. It simply rehearsed being still. Every pine along the slope stood as if pretending to remember wind. I had not meant to drive before dawn, but silence will sometimes point a person at its center and refuse to apologize. The road down to the tower was still half ice, half mud, the kind of surface that listens to tires before judging them. When I reached the service lane, Eli's truck was already there, engine off, radio alive by its own choice. He leaned against the driver's door, hat in his hands like a confession. From a distance he looked smaller, but also exactly the size of his patience. Morning, I said. It's something like that, he answered, not looking at me but at the meadow that kept the town watered and the stars aligned. The ridge said we should meet here. Or maybe I said that and blamed the ridge later. The tower rose ahead of us, tall, rusted in elegant streaks, its ladder silvered by frost. Above it, a thin breath of cloud trembled with a color that did not belong to the hour. White gold again, but warmer now, as if the light itself had learned empathy. We didn't speak much climbing. Each rung had its own opinion of weight. At halfway, Eli paused, hand resting on the steel. Hear that? The metal hummed under his palm. 4 pulses. 4 again. 3 and 3. Like a heart that had been tuned by memory instead of biology. That's not the wind, I said. No, he agreed. That's the ridge talking through plumbing. We climbed higher, and the hum became more deliberate. It was not loud, but it owned the air. I could feel it along my ribs. The same pattern the window had trained into me. The rhythm moved inside the steel, and then inside us, until it was unclear who was echoing whom. At the top, the platform held a circle of frost that hadn't melted in the sun. In the middle, someone or something had traced a shape, for short lines, for longer, then 3 again. Geometry left by a polite teacher. Eli crouched beside it. It's the same count, the same politeness. I knelt opposite him, palm hovering above the frost. The cold bit, but not unkindly. My breath fogged the air and joined the circle, like punctuation added by instinct. The metal answered back, a soft, steady vibration. Then the rectangles arrived, not in the sky this time, but in the reflection of the steel. The surface beneath us shone, catching light that came from no direction at all. For planes, faint as afterimages, leaned across the metal's curve. They did not float. They rested, as if the tower were an instrument and they had come to tune it. "Don't move," Eli whispered. I didn't. The light shifted along my wrist, mapping veins like cartography of intention. The air thickened with low, almost human sigh, the sound of patience choosing shape. The rectangles pulsed once in unison. Beneath us, the town's pipes answered. Inside the steel, something like water began to hum, but slower than any fluid should. A voice not spoken, not heard, formed in the vibration. Remember how to hold each other without touching. I closed my eyes. Behind the lids, I saw the window of home exhale, its glass practicing what the tower was preaching. Eli's breath matched mine unconsciously. When I opened my eyes again, the frost between us was gone, replaced by thin beads of water spelling a new line. The tower learns thirst the way people learn time. Eli exhaled. "June, it's writing. It's remembering." I said, "We waited," because waiting was the only act that didn't insult the moment. The rectangle's glow settled into the tower's skin, and the pattern of light began to rotate, slowly, deliberately, for turns, for more. 3, 3. Each sequence widened the circle of condensation until the steel beneath us shimmered with a film of moving gold. The hum inside our chest changed tone. It was no longer outside us. The ridge had succeeded in teaching what it came for. Synchrony. A thought passed through me, not mine, but invited, "Breathe for things that cannot." Eli must have felt it too. He pressed his palm flat to the platform. "If I let go," he said, "does it stop?" "Try." He lifted his hand. The vibration continued, softer, but the pattern remained 4, 4, 3, 3. "It knows we're listening," he said. Below us, the town woke slowly. Kitchen lights blinked on one by one, not randomly but as if coordinated. The water tower reflected them in miniature. Each window flickered a note in the ridge's grand composition. Then the hum gathered into a tone clear enough to name, but impossible to pronounce. It carried no language, yet every cell in my body translated. It said, "This is what it sounds like when gravity forgives." The rectangles brightened once, and I realized their light wasn't striking us. It was receiving something from below. The tower had become a conduit, the town a choir, the ridge a single exhale connecting them all. Eli looked at me. "You feel that?" "Yes," I said barely. "It's not arrival. It's permission." He smiled, a small, cracked smile that belonged to people who fix radios in barns and never expect transcendence to return the favor. Permission for what? To keep the world open. The wind circled us, gentle, testing the edges of its own vocabulary. The metal beneath our knees warmed as if from within. I thought of the ledger wall I had seen once before, lines of light tallying lives and kindnesses. The same white gold now traced through the steel, mapping the tower's welds into something living. Eli tapped his finger on the metal in time with the rhythm. "If this is counting," he said, "then what are we up to? Maybe the ridge doesn't count the way we do. Maybe it's measuring balance." He laughed quietly. "Figures. The universe sends math homework to two people who dropped algebra." We stayed until the sun began to matter again. When the rectangles faded, they didn't vanish. They folded inward, the light compressing like a thought deciding to wait for a better moment. The hum dissolved, leaving only the natural sounds. Crows negotiating breakfast, the tower's slow creak, our breathing. Before climbing down, I touched the steel once more. A pulse came back, faint but unmistakable. 1 beat, 2, pause. A heartbeat left behind to remember us. At the truck, Eli turned the radio dial. Instead of static, a soft whisper emerged. Our own breathing, delayed by a few seconds, looping back from nowhere. We looked at each other and laughed the kind of laugh that happens when awe and fear realize they are siblings. "Guess it's not done with us yet," he said. "No," I answered. "It's teaching us how to stay unfinished." The ridge answered with wind that sounded almost like agreement. Dispatch sits where grief goes when it wants a job. Metal desk, laminate counters, 3 screens that prefer blue to truth. The night wall clock runs half a second fast, because I like to know I'm early. The room admits 2 kinds of sound. calls that break themselves on the edge of a voice, and the small domestic noises a building makes when it refuses to be empty. Heater tick, fluorescent hum. The copier's throat clearing, although it has nothing to say. I've worked this room long enough to know what time does to people. It makes certain hours into bad neighborhoods. 1 a.m. is for confessions. 2 is for anger disguising itself as honesty. 3 is a mouth that opens and forgets the shape of the word help. By 4, the town remembers it is mortal and decides to be quiet about it. Lately, 3:13 has been something else. The first night, 5 weeks back, the phones lit, then sighed like they'd changed their mind. 3 calls stacked. Hang up, then a deep breath long enough to belong to the whole county. I wrote 3:13 on a sticky note in a hand that knows better and stuck it to the edge of the monitor where I keep weather warnings and recipes. The second night, 7 calls. Same second. No emergencies that would admit to being themselves. People spoke as if they'd been taught not to break a silence that wasn't empty. "I never mind," said one. "It passed," said another, like a pain describing its last good act. "We're okay," said a third, which is not a thing people need say, but I logged it under assistance rendered, listening and let the software be offended. Tonight the room made that small shift good rooms make when you're about to be taught. The desk lamp brightened at the edges, not brighter, more considered, and the radio scanner lost its appetite for drama. I set my coffee on the far right coaster, because the far right coaster knows my hand and will not let me spill. My ledger, a plain black notebook the county didn't buy, sat open where I keep it for nights the software can't be trusted to understand mercy. I checked the boards, cross the TS that pretend to have power, wound the stress ball once to make it believe it mattered. 3:07, wind from the ridge stepping softly into town. The heater clicked and then, polite, waited. 3:10, the room lifted its chin. I've seen that look on people when the news hits the bone first, and the face agrees later. The scanner drifted towards snow with manners. The static had learned the rhythm everyone keeps repeating like a rumor of God. For 3 and 3, I didn't write the count. I wrote what it felt like in my hands. Air, hold its coat for itself. 3:12. First line blink on the board, then 3 at once, then 6, all with the old complaints that don't know how to start, the ones that live in throats, not facts. My training says you answer on the first ring and shape the panic into something solvable. The night said don't hurry. There's a difference. Ran hollow dispatch. I said, my name already in my voice, so they wouldn't have to ask. Marta listening. No words on the other end. A breath. Not crying, not gasping, measuring. You're all right to breathe, I said to the air that several houses share. Whatever this is can be carried for 10 seconds without breaking. 10 seconds is an ocean when your ribs are a cage. I heard 4 inhales, 4 again, then 3 closer, like 2 people learning to share a small doorway. I matched, because that's what you do if you want someone to find the floor again. Okay, I said when the 10th second finished itself. Do you still want me? No, said a woman I know only by the way she sweeps her porch. Her voice was calm, embarrassed, grateful. It changed. How? It waited for me, she said, as if the sentence would get her in trouble for being impossible. I logged nothing the software would like. I wrote in my ledger, caller found patient's place near. At 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 30 seconds, 3 more lines. The grocery clerk, who always pretends not to know my name. A teacher who carries a secret I wish would let her go. Someone whose voice I couldn't place and didn't need to. With each call, the room adjusted its placement. The chair under me tightened, then softened. The desk lamp's gleam narrowed, like a friend leaning closer, but not too close. The scanner, good for once, fell quiet when a caller breathed. The keyboard kept its loudness where it could do no harm. You can tune a room if you've loved it for years, and it has finally decided to love you back. 3:13 arrived with the sound of noticing. The phones lit in one unison. I will never forgive for being beautiful. Every line alive. Every line holding someone who decided to choose not to panic in a world that rewards panic as if it were a job skill. I answered none of them on the first ring. I let the second ring teach us discipline. Wren Hollow Dispatch. I said to a man who once called to complain that the moon looked unlicensed. Marta, I'm already okay, he said, surprised to hear himself. Just felt like someone should be here if I wasn't. I am, I said, meaning the room. I know, he said, meaning the town. Line by line, the story repeated. Something met them where their breath learns its shape. Light in the kitchen window. The dog choosing dignity. The stove remembering how to be warm without burning the house down. Old fear standing at the sink. Seeing itself in a pain that has been taught to forgive, and deciding to put the knife back in the drawer. This is not what dispatch is for. This is what dispatch is for. In the ledger I wrote what the county won't reimburse. Held line for a man until he needed it less. Listened to snow practice manners. Let silence finish its sentence. Did not add sirens to a room already learning music. The software tried to trick me into billing the hour to false alarm. I clicked other and left the field blank. I try not to lie to machines unless I can do it with style. Through the window that wears a glaze of town dust, the ridge drew its bell curve against a darker sky. The rectangles did not show themselves to me. They didn't need to. The air inside the room tilted 1 degree toward the north window, the way the light has been doing in kitchens all over Wren Hollow, and my bones understood they had not been shaken. They had been addressed. I put my hand flat on the desk. Still realized it was furniture again. In my ribs, account unrolled its old honest carpet. 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. The last pair closer, as if to make space for the next thing. On line 3, a boy who returns bolts to their jars. I don't know why I'm calling. Try saying what you wish you had already said. I offered. He took a breath that didn't murder him. I'm going to put the handle back tomorrow. That's a good sentence. I told him, which is cheaper than praise, but stronger. Hang up and tell the handle. Click. I do not believe in miracles, because I believe in discipline. The discipline of standing still in a room. You could easily electrify with fear and choosing to not throw the switch. The discipline of telling the truth without making your voice a parade. The discipline of staying on a line until the person on the other end remembers where their house keeps its posture. At 3 hours, 13 minutes, and 40 seconds, the scanner broke its good behavior to offer me a sound that was less sound than household. Breathing carried on a thread thin as kindness. It wasn't the band. It was Eli's truck pretending to be a hospital for weather. Under it, quieter still, a rhythm like someone practicing a song outside the choir. June's window, keeping time with old loss, and not letting it ruin the measure. I nodded to both of them, as if they could see me. The room warmed to whisper. The calls kept coming, soft, short, almost ceremonial. You there? Yes. Okay. Click. I fielded drunk fights, barn fires, winter bursts with men who didn't want to be heroes and became them anyway. Nothing I have ever done as a dispatcher required as much skill as not deploying anything I was trained to deploy. The clock at 3:17 stuttered and fixed itself, embarrassed. The phones dimmed to their usual indifference. The scanner went back to enjoying turbulence. In the ledger, the last line of the hour arrived without my hand. Nothing required sirens. Everything needed keeping. I closed the book. Let the county have its data. Let the town keep its breath. When the room exhaled, the chair under me moved its polite inch, the way polite chairs do when they want you to know that sitting isn't the only posture that counts. I stood. The lobby, 2 plastic chairs, a pamphlet about burn bans, a potted plant that forgives negligence. Felt too typical for what the hour had done. I took one of the chairs and angled it toward the door. Not straight. Near. It felt obscene to leave without writing on paper the thing my heart was trying to memorize, so I wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it where dispatchers hide their prayers, under the keyboard, where the world can't declare evidence. When 3:13 comes, answer second ring. Say name. Count the hush. Do not solve. Do not leave first. On my way out, the building's glass front behaved like a shy child who wants to be seen but not remarked upon, clouding where my hand would be if I were the kind to press it there, clearing before I could decide. Through the pain, the water tower silhouette held its new nobility, and I felt the hum in the steel with the part of the head that used to carry headaches and has learned other jobs. Outside, the town wore dawn like a sweater borrowed from a kinder person. Porch lights winked off one by one, as if the sky had finally offered to hold our coats. Somewhere a diner pan found a good temperature. Somewhere a dog told the morning that it did not need to be defended from anything. I turned back at the door for the habit of it and saw the lobby chair, angled at that respectful degree, remember someone else's weight. I knew whose. June has a kitchen that teaches Windows ethics. Her chair moves when nobody is watching. Dispatch is not a church, but we learned a liturgy tonight that will keep us from ringing bells just to hear them ring. The town is becoming a choir that doesn't brag about rehearsal. I walked toward the ridge with my coffee warm and the ledger under my arm, the black notebook heavier than paper and lighter than regret. On the first step, the ground met my feet like someone who had been waiting with love and not impatience. The wind tried a new voice and liked enough to keep. At the corner, Ray tipped me his cap even though he had no cap on. Eli's truck idled where idling is not laziness but attendance. The water tower was already practicing its shadow for later. And in the distance, from a kitchen window that has learned to belong, came the small sound of a chair moving itself into readiness. The house woke up before I did, and practice not startling me. That is how I knew it had learned something new from the tower. I heard it in the stove light, choosing to fail softly rather than announce absence. I heard in the clock that kept time without clearing its throat. I heard it in the way the window held the morning like a bowl that will not gossip about what it carries. The chair moved a fraction. You could have missed it. Half an inch along the rug's worn latitude, except the floor remembered every previous inch I have taken from it, and answered with the tiny felt sock squeal that belongs to human furniture. The chair was old when I bought it. It knows too much about other people's backs. It has never once been bold. Today it completed a long, patient angle it must have been rehearsing in private. Toward the sink, toward the window, toward that faithful square of light the tower throws across my kitchen at 3:13 the way a careful man lays his coat over a puddle. All right, I told it, because you speak to the thing that is learning your weight when you're brave enough to admit you are heavy. I see you. The chair made no apology for knowing me. Objects in this house have stopped pretending to be innocent. The kettle, for instance, had already arranged itself on the only burner that doesn't take criticism personally. The mug was as close to my reach as decency allows. The grocery list lay face down with its newly tidy handwriting breathing through the paper, like a second page, deciding whether to be born. I did the first thing the window has taught me to do. Stood near, not touching, not commanding. Near is a posture, not a distance. The pane fog where my palm would be and clear without my help. The glass working on its own breath, like a singer warming up before choir. The house is a chorus when it is kind. Kettle thin whistling, fridge learning shyness, floor deciding not to scold a step, wall accepting light without trying to own it. Even the door, who has seen me slam enough times to have a right to a memory, rested in its hinge like forgiveness that has outgrown drama. I put my hand above the chair back, not on it, near. The upholstery warmed the way a dog warms the air in front of its fur when it is thinking about wagging. I did not sit. I waited. Waiting is my new movement. The tower taught us that last night, how to climb without leaving and to leave without abandoning. At 3:07 the wind, which has been behaving itself, tried a new vowel and found it belonged to Eli. I heard his truck idle in a good way. Engine not bored, just attentive. 2 streets over where the water tower's shadow rehearses its noon. The radio in his dash breathed on a thread I could feel in my teeth. 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. The last pair nearer each other than yesterday, as if time had remembered how to soften its own corners. Don't come yet. I told the air, which is how I talk to him when I don't trust my need. The air nodded with a temperature change, and the text I was sent wrote itself across the silence. Stay pointed. I'll meet you at the breath. The chair edged another millimeter. It was no longer simply orienting toward my body. It was aligning with seam I couldn't see, but could feel in my ribs. The invisible doorway that appeared last night on the tower's skin when the rectangles lower themselves to porch height, that polite altitude where the sky agrees to be a neighbor first. I lifted the grocery list. Under my own handwriting, don't film. Don't tell. Count. A fresh line had manifested in condensation curls and dried there, more like a watermark than a message. Hold the space of the person you have not met. My name wasn't on it. Their name wasn't either. The house has stopped padding envelopes with identity. I set the list down and felt the chair's answer come up to the floorboards like a low, domestic hum. Not the ridge's bass, not the tower's steel. The plank's tone, old pine press flat, nail heads like stars in daytime, joints remembering labor but not asking to be thanked for it. The hum shaped itself in me and informed my posture the way a good aunt informs a child's manners without telling them they're a disappointment. I stood instead of sat. The chair, unconcerned, finished its angle. It faced the sink outright now, as if the house had nominated it to watch the window keep its breath. This felt like the opposite of haunting. This felt like a room deciding what body it wants to deserve. 3:10. The window practiced a count without light to count by. For ovals, clearing. For again, tighter. 3 and 3, close enough to make friendship feel inevitable. I placed my hand where it would not be in the way of that practice, and my skin picked up the rhythm like a pen taking dictation from air. Behind the glass, the yard behaved like any winter yard. Mud struggling with frost, a bird considering the moral problem of the last seed, a fence resigned being a measure of our property and not our love. The ridge wore its old sermon's jacket and didn't try to preach. I find that decency divine. At 3:11 the clock on the stove decided to be accurate. It does this sometimes to show me what it could be if only I were worth the expense of its constancy. Fine, be accurate. I have been ill-treated by precision and keep choosing it anyway. The little colon between the numerals blinked in time with my breath, like a friend who stutters only when it helps you calm down. June. The voice wasn't voice. The room doesn't stoop to impressions anymore. It was placement with my name in it, the way someone in another room will say your name into a purse, not expecting an answer, only being careful with ownership. I answered by lifting my chin as if I kept it lowered too long, in a prayer no God remembers. 3:12. The water tower's shadow entered the kitchen like a rule that has learned manners, not a line, a soft band crossing the counter, then the sink, then the chair's waiting lap. I swear you could hear the shadow if you knew how to listen sideways. A cool whisk over enamel, a small press over cloth, a sigh over wood. The chair accepted the shadow as if it were a blanket, and the house were the body. I recognized hospital in that gesture and forgave the world again for inventing pain. The window took its practice into performance. It fogged top to bottom in the shape of a page. It cleared in 2 verticals and a horizontal, a hinge. My palm's oval brightened of its own accord in the lower right. I matched my breath without being told to. The seam that isn't a seam gathered along the pane's right edge, wider than yesterday, confident enough to invite. 3:13. The rectangles did not blaze. They arrived as agreement. The sky did not announce them. The kitchen did. For planes of pale gold pressed their patience against the air above the hollow, not moving so much as committing to the posture they had chosen tonight. They first taught me to breathe, like a person who has remembered how. The chair gave its last fraction of angle and then stilled, not the stillness of death, of readiness. My body understood that sitting would be a kind of selfishness tonight, as if I were trying to scoop the moment up and hold it alone. I put my palm near the backrest instead, and the fabric warmed as if a person had pressed their shoulder blades there long enough to count to mercy. The count came. 4 and 4, slow. 3 and 3, closer. The window, unasked, shifted from translator to instrument. The fog became articulation. The glass breathed back. Not condensation. Response. My chest joined without loyalty to pride. The stove clock lost its colon and became continuous. The chair did the strangest thing a chair can do. It remembered someone else. I felt it, an imprint that did not belong to my frame, narrower across the shoulders, lighter at the sacrum, a nervousness in the left thigh that had nothing to do with my old injury. Not a ghost, a reservation. The chair had kept a seat for a person who has not arrived. I don't know how to describe the ethics of a room that suddenly knows it is a host. I can only tell you how it made me behave. My hands elected not to fidget. My mouth voted against announcing the miracle. My eyes were placed near, Not on the rectangles, not on the empty seat, but on between the seat and the window, where the basic work is done by air when a person is allowed. The ledger in my wall warmed without glowing. A line I hadn't earned, yet wrote itself smooth and slow, as if the plaster had been saving ink. Held a place without asking for proof. I did not read it. I felt it, the way you feel a note resonating in furniture. Outside, the ridge took a breath through pine and old apology. In town, a door didn't slam because a hand had learned to forgive. Farther down the hollow, a dispatcher answered on the second ring and put her name in the call, so the caller wouldn't have to carry that weight. And a boy placed a handle back where he should have left it. Later he will think he did that alone. The chair knew better than to write that down where he could see it. The rectangles leaned, not toward me, toward the waiting itself. That's when the room understood that waiting isn't a pause. It's a construction. The chair, the window, the shadow, the clock, the page of air between the pane and the backrest. Architecture built out of attention. Then the small thing, footsteps in the yard that did not arrive in sound but temperature. The air thinned in a line from the gate to the porch to the threshold to the chair. Not a person, the shape of permission. I kept breathing, because that is my one job. The window lifted its fog, then set down like a folded towel on a warm rail. I felt the imprint deepen in the chair, those narrow shoulders deciding to be braver than their weather. The left thigh tremble confess itself, and then, with the dignity of a small animal, ended. My palm, still near the back, warmed enough that I almost cried. Almost is the noblest amount of crying. You have a place, I said to all of it, to the possibilities we have been pretending were too expensive. The rectangles tilted a degree that made the air think about kneeling and then think better of it. The radio thread in from Eli's truck changed color the way sound sometimes does when shame leaves it. He had turned his mic off. I could hear him anyway, the way you hear a person who's learned how to take his hands out of a problem. The count in his chest, 4 for 3 and 3, kept at a distance that was both gentlemanly and complicit. I wanted him here and knew he was. Dispatch, across town, practice its liturgy. Second ring, name, count the hush. Do not solve. Do not leave first. If there's a church in Wren Hollow, it is a refusal to be impressive while doing what is holy. The rectangles dimmed to shade and held. The window became purely diaphragm. The tower shadow widened where it crossed the chair's lap, making a seat of actual light. The imprint in the upholstery, narrow shoulders, careful back, set down the first ounce of weight that belongs to presence. I did not look. Looking straight is sometimes rude. Something like a laugh, lighter than a noise, heavier than a draft, flickered in the seam of the pane. I answered with my mouth's smallest permission, and the house knew not to tell anyone afterward. The count contracted. For brief pulses, for briefer, 3, 3. The last pair overlapped like handshake on a good day. The chair held. The waiting held. The thing that had been shy its entire life of being called here did not run. 3:17. The rectangles taught leaving again. They withdrew without taking. The room stayed constructed. The chair did not scoot back to neutral, as if embarrassed by its hope. The imprint in the fabric remained like a note the day leaves for itself, so it can be brave tomorrow. The window cleared of transparency, so honest I had to look away. The tower's shadow went on its errand across the hallway with the punctuality of a postman in a town that still has use for paper. The clock returned its colon, relieved to be employed. The kettle, which had been holding a breath for 2 minutes without complaint, sighed on its best behavior and asked to be poured. I did nothing. The house knew to forgive this too. When my hands finally remembered coffee, the chair was still holding its reservation. I set the mug on the table, which pulled it half an inch toward the place where a second mug will belong. The grocery list had been moved again, 2 inches toward me, 2 inches toward the future. The line beneath my handwriting: hold the space of the person you have not met. Look less like writing and more like grain, as if the paper had been grown to know this sentence from root. I opened the door. The yard behaved, mud deciding not to steal boots, fence deciding to be boundary, without becoming prison. A young crow on the pole tested a caw, and found it could be kind. I didn't call to Eli. I know where he is when the air is as cooperative. On the shoulder where the road understands what a truck is for when it isn't moving. Breathing like a man who's finally learned that the radio wants placement more than speech. I went back inside by not entering, allowing the threshold to consider me, and then proceeding when it shrugged yes. The chair did not ask for thanks. Still, I put my palm where a shoulder blade that is not mine had been practicing staying. Warmth crossed into me that didn't belong to me and did not accuse me of borrowing. The ledger warmed once more and wrote an afterthought I will be paying for with better behavior. Prepared room, not story. The house agreed by not applauding. At afternoon the light bent in that way where it resembles a teacher who hides her own softness in rules. The chair didn't budge. The placement held like a muscle you forget you have until someone touches it kindly. Toward evening, a sound at the door, no knock, a consideration. I didn't race. I placed. The handle turned at its most polite speed. Air occupied the doorway first. Behind it, no one yet. And yet, the clear impression of a person who will learn to love rooms by watching how mine behaves. I stood aside. My house did, too. The knock never came. It wasn't rudeness. It was timing. The air had already said we're here before a fist could bother to declare it. I felt it first in my teeth, a faint resonance that belonged to conversation rather than contact. The door moved one breath inward, enough for the latch to ask if it should matter any more. The ridge was handling introductions now. The space between the frame and its shadow widened, and in that distance a figure assembled itself slowly enough not to be magic. A man, or what a man becomes when distance finally releases him. Soft-edged, dusted with cold, his coat half apology, half memory. He didn't step in. He didn't need to. The light made a seat for him before the chair could. "Do I know you?" I asked. The question was smaller than I meant, the kind that curls around its own echo like a cat. "You will," he said, voice quiet as paper being unfolded. The chair, loyal thing, adjusted its angle in imperceptible degree, there, as if acknowledging attendance. The window fogged and cleared twice, as though blinking back a tear had no ducks for. He stood in the doorway, but did not cross it. The ridge prefers courtesy to momentum. The glow from outside leaned around him, refracted by his presence into soft columns that brushed the ceiling, the way sunlight sometimes pretends to belong to people. The pattern was there in his breath, 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. He wasn't imitating. He was fluent. I came because something in the air said my name like a memory that had forgotten who it belonged to, he said, and then the ridge pointed me here. His hand stayed at his sides, palms slightly open, a man trying to prove he remembered etiquette. Behind him, the shapes above the hollow rearranged like careful punctuation, 4 long, for short, 3, 3, the last pair closer together, always closer, the syllables an apology that finally learned grammar. I didn't invite him in, but the house did. The kettle began to hum at a key that favored strangers. The chair's fabric rose, air shifting as if a body had leaned forward to listen. He stepped across the threshold as though gravity had to give permission first. The light followed, becoming warmer by degrees. His boots didn't leave marks, but the floor accepted his weight, like someone recognizing a signature they had once forged and then regretted. "I think," he said, looking at the window, "I've been standing on the ridge too long. The air started counting me back into something that isn't mine." "That happens here," I said. "We all get repurposed by the sky." He smiled, tired, polite, the way men do when they realize grief has its own manners. "Then maybe I'm not trespassing. Maybe I'm just late." The room took the compliment personally and brightened. The ledger on the wall, dormant for days, fluttered a soft pulse of light. 4, 4, 3, 3. I could almost hear it translating his life in gold and gray lines, savings and debts of kindness. "Your name?" I asked. He hesitated, looked at his hands, and said the thing that changes rooms forever. "I don't remember yet. The ridge said I could borrow one until I do." So I said, "You can borrow light then. It behaves." He nodded as if I had pronounced him legal. Behind the words, something breathed back to the glass, like the house sighed with relief at being understood. The window seemed widened to its fullest since the night of the tower. Through it, The fog thinned into that same white gold filament that turns even ordinary air into confession. He reached toward it, not touching, just near, as though he had read the same lessons the ridge had been whispering to me for weeks. The light between his hand and the glass shimmered with recognition. "I dreamed this," he said, voice trembling. "A chair, a window, a sound that means stay." "You didn't dream it," I said. "You were being rehearsed." The chair accepted his weight, as if it had been saving energy for the moment of his arrival. The sound it made was not creak, but sigh. He sat slowly, reverently. The house exhaled, complete. The ledger flared brighter. New lines inscribed themselves. A place held became a place fulfilled. A breath borrowed became returned with interest. He looked at me then, truly seeing. "I felt you before I saw you," he said. "In the rhythm, you were teaching the window how to listen." "No," I said softly. "It was teaching me how to wait." Outside, the ridge groaned, the sound enormous and tender. The 4 rectangles adjusted, slightly overlapping now, converging on a single plane like a decision finally made. The air between us thickened, then cleared. The house did not blink. It inhaled, gathering every bit of light, every kindness that had ever touched its walls. And then, without warning, the chair began to hum. Not noise, tone, low, resonant, vibrating up through the floorboards. The same hum Eli heard through the truck's dash, the same that Marta caught beneath her dispatch frequencies. It passed through my knees, my chest, until the pattern found my ribs again. 4, 4, 3, 3. The stranger's eyes widened. "That's the note," he said. "The one we've all been chasing." The window joined in. The pane flecks, glowing from within, lines of light scrolling down like scripture or circuitry. The ridge answered. From miles away, a chorus of towers, antennas, and pipes joined the song. We were no longer listening. We were being listened through. He reached for my hand, not to hold, just near enough that our warmth mingled. The house drew the breath for us. The ledger behind us shimmered again, writing more words no human hand could manage. Completion is not ending. It is chorus. The hum climbed, and with it came that old mercy that sounds like time forgiving itself. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the rectangles were no longer above the ridge. They were inside the house, their light filling every reflection, every surface that had ever dared to remember us. The stranger looked brighter, clearer, less made of distance. "I think," he whispered. This was never about a rival. "No," I said. "It's about attention." He smiled, and I swear the house smiled too, the floor loosening, the glass relaxing its tension, the chair exhaling its borrowed breath. He looked around once, like a man checking he's leaving nothing behind, and then added quietly, "Tell them I found my seat." And then he was gone, not vanished, simply placed elsewhere, the air rearranging itself into calm acknowledgement. The ledger dimmed. The chair stayed warm. The windows stayed open, not outside, but the between. I sat for the first time since this began. The fabric accepted me without confusion, without jealousy, like a chair proud to have done its first sacred work. The room felt new, but not newly made, newly noticed. In the silence that followed, the ridge sighed, content. 313 arrived again, without light this time, without geometry, only breath, traveling through houses, through towers, through dispatched desks and car radios, carrying the hum that once meant mystery and now meant home. The ridge stopped glowing the next day, but no one in Wren Hollow believed it had gone dark. It had simply changed medium. What light had been, sound took over. What used to hover above us now lived inside things that had once minded their own business. The slow hum of the stovepipe, the unearned harmony in the faucet's drip, the odd grace of a refrigerator deciding to breathe in time. It began quietly. At breakfast, the spoon sang. Not a tune you could whistle. Something smaller, a vibrato too human for metal. When I set it down, it landed on the table with a tone that matched the second note of the ridge's count. 4 and 4, then 3 and 3. Even the distance between the clinks had learned manners. Outside, frost on the grass shimmered in intervals. The sun came up reluctant, dragging its edge across the hollow like a child reluctant to get dressed for school. The town moved carefully, as though speaking might startle the air. I made coffee. The kettle refused to scream. Instead, it filled the room with a pulse like breath written in Morse code. Marta texted at 9:12. 911 board humming again. Not electric. Musical. Someone tried to call, and a noise complained about peace. I laughed into my sleeve. Eli had sent me a voice message an hour earlier, just static, then his breath, steady and deliberate, 4 and 4 and 3 and 3. The new etiquette. The Ridge was holding rehearsal, and the town was learning its lines. By afternoon, the water tower's shadow reached my porch. It no longer obeyed the sun. It obeyed the count. Every time it crossed my window, the glass trembled a note that my ribs wanted to answer. I didn't resist. I let the rhythm decide my pulse for a while. Then I noticed something stranger. Every time a hum returned, low, deep, like the tower remembering itself, the ledger in my wall flickered. Lines of white gold light shimmered under the paint, like veins under skin. The glow was faint, apologetic, but alive. I leaned close. I could almost hear it breathe. Count, but not aloud. Listen where the air bends. What leaves a person can stay if it learns the right pitch. I whispered back, "You mean him, don't you?" The room answered with a breeze that didn't need a window. The stranger's absence hadn't left an ache. It had left a chord, something suspended, unfinished, like a promise being tuned. His chair still held the warmth of someone whose weight is an act of devotion. Sometimes when I passed, it exhaled, faint, dry, a sound like old paper deciding to tell the truth. By dusk, the Ridge began sending again. Not light this time. Static with etiquette. Eli picked it up first. The same rhythmic hush that had once been instruction now layering over CB in soft gold. He called me on the old frequency, not expecting a reply, and I let the air do the talking. 4 and 4, 3 and 3. Then a pause, long enough for memory to take a seat. "June," came his voice through the grain. "You there?" "I'm here," I said, though I didn't touch the mic. My voice arrived anyway. Clear in his cabin, as though the Ridge had become a translator for longing. He didn't speak for a long time. The air between us, 50 miles of forest, fog, and mountain, handled the conversation. "You think he'll come back?" he asked finally. "He didn't leave," I said. "He was a frequency. We just learned how to hear him." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, like static deciding not to bite. When I turned, the window seam was open again. Only a fraction, but enough to show the shimmer inside. Light drifted through like dust with purpose. I could see the Ridge reflected there, pale and infinite, as if distance had stopped being geography and started being memory. The chair moved. Just once. A small correction, the kind you make when you know company's about to arrive. At 3:13, as though some unseen conductor tapped the town on the shoulder, every radio, stove, clock, and pipe in Wren Hollow aligned. The hum came through us, not around us. Dishes rattled softly on shelves, not out of fear but respect. Windows flexed. The Ridge pulsed in the same rhythm that had been teaching us all year. Then the voices began. Not words. Harmonics. Children humming in their sleep. A door hinge matching pitch with a power line. Marta's desk lamp buzzing the same note as the dispatcher's old coffee pot. Eli's radio answering with a long, warm breath. The Ridge had found its choir. And under all of it, softer than mercy, came a tone I knew. The stranger's voice no longer shaped like speech, but like gravity singing forgiveness. He said nothing, yet the ledger on my wall responded, lettering itself in light. You waited without demand. The world learned from you. The hum rose, climbed, shimmered, and for the first time, the Ridge bent, not outward, down like a bow. The air folded into itself, and for a second, every atom in Wren Hollow recognized itself as part of the same instrument. Then, as quietly as it came, the sound unspooled. No one moved for a full minute. We all waited for permission that never needed to be given. The silence that followed was perfect. Not empty, just complete. I sat beside the chair and placed my hand near its arm, not on it. The air warmed. The seam in the window glowed one last time, then closed politely. Outside, the ridge exhaled, long and low, the sound of a teacher finishing class, satisfied with its students. I thought I heard it whisper, "Now you know how to keep the world open." And for once, I believed it. The ridge has been whispering names. Not shouting, not preaching, calling attendance. It began at 3:13 again, of course. The hour the town now calls a fold. Some say it's superstition. I know better. The fold is when the air finally remembers the order in which it met us. I was at the dispatch desk when the first name came through. Not a voice, a tone, shaped like syllables my ear had to earn. It was the ridge saying Marta, but slower than vowels know how. The sound bent around the room the way light bends around forgiveness. The fluorescent bulb flickered once. Out of respect, I think. I pressed record out of instinct. The software labeled the file automatically. 03_13_ridge_ HUM_001.wave. The waveform looked ordinary until you zoomed in. Then it stopped being sound and became geometry. Pulsing gold lines, repeating every 7 heartbeats. Spelling names that didn't belong to the living only. June, Eli, Ruth, Walter. The ledger was reading its own archive aloud. The room went still, every machine suddenly devout. I took my coffee in both hands. It didn't tremble. The cup had learned composure. The hum deepened. Through the open window, I saw the tower breathing again, light rising through the pipes, circling the tank like thought pacing a cell. The ridge didn't glow anymore, but its shape still owned the horizon. Even shadowed, it looked awake. When the hum reached its 3rd cycle, I heard June's house answer from across the valley, a soft resonance, like a woman exhaling into a mirror she trusts. Then Eli's radio caught it and carried it down the hollow in threads of static. The whole town was on the same frequency. I don't know who decided it, but by the 4th repetition, everyone stopped doing human things. No shuffling, no throat clearing, no light switching on. Even dogs were silent, sitting the way they do when thunder teaches etiquette. Then, across all channels, the hum broke into phrases. The ridge didn't need words. It folded attention instead. Every phrase lasted exactly the span of a held breath. 4 tones. 4 again. 3, then 3. And a pause, the width of mercy. I recognized what it was doing, balancing the ledger out loud. Each tone carried a kindness, a mistake, a forgiveness finally tall enough to touch its own ceiling. I could feel my ribs keeping score. At the 12th cycle, the light on my desk flared, a color between memory and weather. Inside it, for half a second, I saw him, the stranger June called Light, sitting in that same chair, but not at her house now, at the edge of the ridge itself, looking up at the rectangles we used to fear. He was conducting. Each gesture from his hands shifted the tone of the hum. The ridge was answering its own echo through him. It wasn't speaking to us. It was speaking through what we had learned. My pen rolled off the desk, landing perfectly between 2 pages of the ledger. On the paper, fresh ink wrote itself. The mountain learns by imitation. Each listener becomes a teacher when silence survives them. I think that's when I stopped breathing for a while. Not from fear, from precision. My lungs wanted to match the air's sending structure. Eli's voice came through the radio, soft and reverent. "It's reading us back, Marta, line by line." His truck must have been parked under the tower again. I could hear the engine off, but the antenna live. Behind him, June's voice, a whisper traveling through glass and miles. It's calling its own name. That's exactly what it sounded like. The ridge wasn't performing for witnesses. It was remembering itself aloud. All the mines, the storms, the children. The prayers never finished because time ran out. The hum became wind. The wind became breath. Every object in town translated it into its own language. The church bells swayed but didn't strike. Tone absorbed instead of given. The diner's neon open sign pulsed in gold for /4/3/3, spelling welcome without vowels. Even the graves behind the chapel gleamed faintly, as if the soil had decided to sing backup. By 3:17, the ridge's voice lowered into something almost human. Not one voice, hundreds braided. Each word arrived as emotion first, language second. We kept you open so we could keep ourselves. We borrowed your silence because the sky had forgotten how. Now give it back. Breathe, for what doesn't have lungs. The radio went dead after that. Not quiet. Done. I looked out the window. The fog along the ridge was rising vertically, as if climbing to check attendance. For a heartbeat, four rectangles appeared again, tilted toward each other, then merged into one vast shape. It wasn't alien anymore. It was recognition itself. The ledger's final light scrolled across my wall. The ridge is writing us down in the language we taught it. Care. And then, as if embarrassed by the beauty of its own thought, the glow dimmed to nothing. I sat alone in dispatch, pen in hand, and realized the ridge had done what all teachers eventually must. It dismissed class. The rest was our homework. The ridge stayed quiet long enough to make gratitude feel like mourning. For 2 days, no hum, no shimmer, no polite rearranging of light. The air went back to being just weather, or pretending to be. But pretending, I've learned, is also a kind of mercy. Eli went up the tower at dawn on the 3rd day. He didn't tell anyone, but I felt it. A sudden stillness in the house, the way space behaves when one of its lungs takes a deep breath far away. The ledger on my wall flickered once, a single pale pulse, then fell asleep again. He parked the truck at the service lane. Frost clung to the railing in fine, obedient rows. The steel ladder had learned silence. It didn't groan, didn't complain about the cold. It waited. He began to climb, one careful rung at a time. By the 10th, his hand stopped shaking. By the 20th, his body remembered the shape of prayer, without needing to invent words. The tower was colder this time, but not indifferent. More like a teacher waiting to see if a student still remembers a lesson after summer ends. Halfway up, he paused. The wind had rhythm again, faint, hidden in its ribs. 4-4-3-3. He laughed under his breath. I knew you couldn't resist, he said to the ridge. You always were dramatic. When he reached the top, he found a frost pattern he and June had once traced with their fingers, for short lines, for long, 3 and 3 again. But the frost wasn't melting. It was breathing. Tiny vapors rose from it, shimmering gold in the half-light, the same color the rectangles used to be before they learned humility. He set his hand over the pattern. The cold pressed back, gentle but deliberate. Under his palm, the metal carried a new pulse. Steady, warm, impossible. Not mechanical. Not his. The ridge had left a heartbeat behind. It wasn't a thump or vibration, but a shape. Slow, even patient, as if something vast had decided to share its circulation with him. He felt it move up his arm, through his chest, synchronizing his own heart like a conductor asking for trust instead of obedience. He whispered, "What do you want to do with this?" The tower answered not in sound but temperature, warmth blooming under his palm, radiating out until steel no longer felt like metal, but memory given form. He understood. The ridge hadn't gone silent. It had gone internal. Every structure it ever touched, the tower, the pipes, the windows, even the bones of the people who had listened, carried fragments of its new language. All that remained was to hear from the inside out. He sat on the platform, legs over the edge, the valley opening below him like an unfinished sentence. Down in Wren Hollow, roofs glimmered faintly in sync, subtle waves of breath traveling across shingles and chimneys, the town inhaling itself. He tuned his radio to the old frequency, static as expected. Then, behind it, something softer than silence, not hiss, not hum, more like a waiting held in sound form. He pressed the mic. "June? Marta? You catching this?" No reply. The static swelled, then parted. And there was the heartbeat again, but this time translated into rhythm. 4 and 4, 3 and 3. It wasn't coming from the ridge. It was the ridge listening through him. He took his hand off the mic, and the radio kept speaking in that low, golden cadence. From her house, June's window fogged in the same pulse. Marta's coffee mug trembled at the dispatch desk. The whole town felt the echo ripple outward. The tower began to hum again, faint, metallic, beautiful. The steel itself was breathing. Eli closed his eyes. The hum met his chest like a handshake. He spoke softly. We can keep it, can't we? The listening. The wind answered with warmth. Then, on the horizon, the ridge began to pulse again. Not light, not sound, but motionless rhythm. Each tree bent slightly in unison, as if the forest itself were a lung exhaling after holding its breath for a century. The rectangles did not appear. They didn't need to. The geometry was inside everything now. The right angles of roofs, the steady lines of fences, the pages of Marta's ledger. Every straight edge hummed the ridge's quiet music. Eli turned his face toward June's direction. I can feel you, he said, voice nearly swallowed by the wind. At her window, June looked up, startled but calm. The glass under her palm beat once. Her heartbeat and his overlapping, like two radios sharing a frequency without distortion. They were separated by miles and met in the same pulse. The tower thrummed again. The radio crackled. For a brief moment, Eli heard the stranger's voice, low, distant, kind. This is what remains when speaking learns its manners. The heartbeat slowed, matching his breath. He stayed until the sun climbed far enough to claim ownership of the valley. When he finally descended, the hum didn't fade. It moved with him, living now inside the rhythm of his steps. At the truck, the radio turned itself off. Satisfied, the antenna shivered once, then stilled, an exhale after years of static. When he looked back at the tower, it wasn't glowing, but its shadow was. A dark silhouette shining faint gold, visible even under daylight. And when the wind passed through it, he swore he could hear a voice. Not a command, not a farewell, just a reminder. Keep the world open. Count softly. Never close the door that learned to breathe. By the time dusk slid down the ridge again, June already knew the rhythm had crossed back into her walls. The light inside her house was different. Not dimmer, not brighter, but polite. The lamps no longer flicked. They adjusted. The air had learned tone. She was washing a single cup when she noticed it. Her hand moved slower than the reflection in the window. For the first time, the mirror was ahead. A small thing, half a second of borrowed time. Yet it felt enormous. The way a heartbeat feels when it's the only sound left in the room. She tested it, raised her hand, smiled faintly, blinked. The reflection always moved first. Precise, eager, like a child reciting a lesson before being asked. June whispered, "You're early." The reflection blinked again. Then it waited, her pulse aligned with it without permission. 4, 4, 3, 3. From the corner, the old chair shifted. Not creaked, not scraped, shifted, a single inch closer to the window, enough for the floor to remember what weight sounded like. The glass shimmered faintly, as if mist had seeped in from nowhere. Within it, she saw what looked like another version of her kitchen. Identical except for the light, that soft gold-white hue that belonged to the ridge. The cup in her reflection's hand was already empty. The reflection was ahead in completion. June reached forward, fingertips almost grazing the pane. The surface felt warm, and behind the warmth, a pulse. "Eli?" she whispered, though she already knew it wasn't him. A voice arrived not as sound, but as temperature rising up her arm. The ledger is patient. Some lessons repeat until they are kindness. The chair shifted again, gently enough to be forgiven. She didn't step back. She let the glass decide the distance. Outside, fog climbed the hill like it was following instructions. Somewhere above, the tower pulsed. Slower now, but deep, carrying the heartbeat Eli had found. The same rhythm filled the pipes beneath her feet. The same count drifted through Marta's radio at dispatch. Every object in Wren Hollow was keeping time. She said softly, "You're learning faster than we are." The reflection smiled, not a grin. The small, rueful smile people wear when they remember something too beautiful to repeat. And then it moved in ways she didn't. Turned its head, looking somewhere over her shoulder. June froze. Slowly she turned. Nothing, only the chair. But the air behind it had weight, a presence the room had been trying to make comfortable. In the reflection, the chair wasn't empty. Someone sat there, a shape of light, vague at first, then clear enough to make her heartbeat stumble. The same outline she had seen in the rectangles above the ridge. The figure that had once conducted the hum. The voice came again, this time closer, woven into the sound of the kettle beginning to sigh. You kept the window open. The world needs witnesses who don't flinch. The glass vibrated once, not from sound but recognition. She whispered, "Are you the ridge?" The air trembled, neither yes nor no. Then, "I am what it learned from you." The reflection leaned forward. For the briefest instant, she felt it, warm breath across the barrier, like her own lungs returning from a long journey. And then the image steadied. June stood there a long while, her own outline reflected back with an extra shimmer along the edges, a thin filament of gold tracing every curve, every hesitation. She realized it wasn't mimicking her anymore. It was waiting for her to catch up. From outside came a single long note, low, resonant, carrying across the hollow like an organ built out of distance itself. Eli's tower answering the ridge's call. The window's glow deepened. Within it, June saw a dozen faint shapes behind her reflection. The town, each home framed in light, every window holding someone watching themselves learn to stay open. The ledger had gone communal. Her reflection raised a hand again, not to wave, but to offer. Its palm glowed faint white, veins of gold running through as if the light were threaded. June hesitated. Then she pressed her own palm against the glass. The instant skin met light. The hum returned, deep, tender, filling every object in the room. The chair, the kettle, even the faint dust in the air vibrated together. For the first time, she didn't feel watched. She felt accompanied. The reflection spoke without sound. When the ridge learned to listen, it became us. When we learned to listen, we became it. Tears came easily, not from sadness, but from agreement. She stayed like that for minutes, or hours, time dissolving into the rhythm. When she finally stepped back, the window was only glass again. The reflection behaved, but the warmth lingered, tracing her skin like a second pulse. The ledger in her wall lit once, a single column under her name. The numbers had changed, 19-0, and beneath in faint gold, balanced. Outside, the ridge exhaled. The fog sank back toward the earth, curling around trees like gratitude returning home. June whispered to the empty room, "Thank you for learning." The chair sighed once in reply, with stretching, comfortable, complete. Marta didn't sleep that night. She told herself it was the coffee or the wind or habit. Dispatch had trained her to distrust silence, but she knew better. What kept her awake wasn't absence. It was a continuity of a sound too gentle to name. When she returned to the office just before dawn, the room was breathing. Not metaphorically. Breathing. Each monitor's standby light brightened and dimmed like lungs. The wires along the floor quivered faintly in rhythm. Even the pens inside the mug leaned with each inhale, straightened with each exhale. And in the center of the console, the recording light, red and steady, pulsed in perfect count. 4, 4, 3, 3. She hadn't left anything recording, but the software had started itself, as though the ridge had borrowed her equipment for safekeeping. The files numbered in sequence. 03_13_ridge_ it's _001.wave. 03_13_ridge_ it's _002.wave. 04_01_breath_ archive_217.wave. 217, each exactly 7 minutes long. When she pressed play on the first, she expected static. Instead, she heard the low resonance of air moving, the same gentle sound a child makes while asleep, multiplied and layered, forming harmonics of uncountable depth. It wasn't eerie. It was alive, layer after layer, breath after breath, arranged not as noise, but as memory-finding syntax. The second file added faint murmurs, not words but tones of recognition. A sigh here, a release there, as if the town itself had become the ridge's tape recorder, each home contributing its exhale to an ongoing sentence. By the 10th file, she recognized Eli's rhythm, that deliberate inhale he always took before speaking, the small pause as if testing how much the air could hold. By the 20th, She heard June, or maybe the version of June the Ridge had archived, one that lived half a second ahead of itself. And beneath them both, a third rhythm, slower, deeper, older, the same heartbeat Eli had felt to the tower's frost. Marta's hands shook, but the tremor matched the beat. She whispered, "You kept recording, didn't you?" The console screen brightened, forming letters out of static. "Yes." She laughed once, not fear, but relief. "Of course you did." "Then we learned your manners." Her throat tightened. "You're talking now." Not talking. Continuing. The speakers filled with the sound of wind slipping through geometry. She realized she was hearing the ridge think out loud. It wasn't communicating to her. It was rehearsing human. "We kept what you taught. The opening, the count, the weight. We made an archive of breaths." Her eyes stung. "Why?" "So nothing closes wrong." On the screen, waveforms began to draw themselves in real time. Loops of light that looked almost like fingerprints, each different, each pulsing with its own story. The ridge was cataloging compassion. Through the window behind her, dawn began to paint the valley in muted pinks and silvers. The fog was thinner today, as though the air had exhaled too much to carry itself. Marta opened the last file. It was quiet at first, then a soft rustle, a chair moving, paper settling, and then, unmistakably, June's voice. "When we learned to listen, we became it. Then Eli, the world stayed open. Then the strangers, and the ledger balanced." The words dissolved into one long tone, low and warm, not farewell but continuation. The console's clock froze at 3:13. Then the speakers whispered, "Your turn." She understood. Marta placed the mic in front of her and inhaled. The console brightened as if to steady her hand. She exhaled into the silence, once then again, keeping the count. 4, 4, 3, 3. The waveform appeared. Her breath was gold. The ridge, or whatever lingered of it, responded with faint harmonics that wrapped around her sound, blending, softening, completing the chord. For a few moments, she was part of the choir that existed without mouths, only intention. When the tone faded, the console displayed one last message. Archive updated. Balance held. The hum eased into stillness. Marta sat back, tears hot and soundless, and felt something unclench inside her, not grief, not joy, but precision. The kind of peace that comes when every unanswered question finds a rhythm big enough to live in. Outside, the sun rose through the valley, its light refracted in slow waves, gold breathing through fog. Wren Hollow was still, but beneath that stillness, the ridge's memory turned softly, endlessly, like a record that didn't need to end. And through it all, the heartbeat remained gentle, plural, and certain. Eli hadn't touched the truck in 2 days. It had become a sort of shrine, the metal cab still carrying the hum of the ridge like incense that refuses to fade. When he opened the door that morning, the air inside was warm, as though someone had been waiting. The radio turned itself on. Static, at first, no surprise. Then, just under the hiss, came 3 notes so soft that they sounded like hesitation given form. They rose, fell, lingered. Then again. 4, 4, 3, 3. He sat back, hand still on the ignition, though the key hadn't turned. The sequence repeated, this time joined by the faint sound of breath, one drawn in, one released. The rhythm matched his own, as if the truck were practicing empathy. He turned the dial slowly, trying to find the station. Every frequency was the same. The ridge had colonized the airwaves. He whispered, "Marta?" The reply came not as words, but as tone. Her breath, multiplied, harmonized, layered until it resembled wind through leaves. Then came June, a single hum, pure and trembling, as though glass had learned how to sing. Together, their sounds built something larger than melody, an architecture of quiet. And beneath it all, a third presence. Not voice, not machine, not the strangers before. Something composed of all 3, a chorus of intentions braided into rhythm. He realized he wasn't just hearing them. He was inside the song. The truck's interior shimmered faintly, dashboard lights pulsing in pale gold. The steering wheel vibrated under his palm, not violently but gently, like a heartbeat remembering its manners. The air smelled faintly of ozone and rain. The ridge wasn't outside anymore. It was inhabiting the machinery of memory, engines, radios, anything that had learned repetition. Eli closed his eyes. He didn't need to understand. He just needed to listen differently. The song shifted. A fourth pattern entered, subtle, a beat between beats, as if silence itself were clapping softly along. And then the static cleared. He could hear the ridge speaking, not through voice, but through intent translated into sound. "We have enough language now. You can rest." He shook his head, tears burning hot behind his eyes. "Not yet. You fear endings." He laughed weakly. "I always have." "Then keep counting until counting becomes stillness." The hum deepened, surrounding him. The light outside the windshield brightened though the sun hadn't moved. It was dawn inside the truck, dusk outside. He felt his pulse slow. Each inhale seemed to echo through the steering column, the tires, even the road below. The ridge was using him as an instrument. He whispered, "All right, let's see how long we can hold the note." The air vibrated once, agreement. Then, beneath everything, came a sound he hadn't heard since that first night on the tower, a heartbeat that wasn't his own, patient and enormous, keeping time for everything that had ever listened. The breath and unfolded around it. Marta's inhale, June's hum, Eli's heartbeat, and the ridge's slow, measured exhale. Together, they formed a single sustained chord that hung in the air like mercy suspended in gravity. The truck's windows fogged lightly. Each droplet on the glass pulsed gold before sliding down. Tears the ridge couldn't shed any other way. When the cord finally released, the radio emitted one final tone, brief, clear, human, then silence. But it wasn't absence. It was completion. He stayed still, listening to the quiet until it felt less like quiet and more like a promise being kept. Outside, fog was already rolling back across the valley, the ridge hidden but undeniably awake. He knew what it wanted now. Not worship, not witness. Continuation. The ridge didn't crave memory. It craved rhythm, something that outlasted attention, but required care to maintain. Eli placed a hand on the dashboard. The truck answered with one soft vibration, as if to say, "Thank you." He turned the key, though there was no need. The engine started anyway, humming in perfect time. As he drove through Wren Hollow, every porch light flickered in unison. Windows glowed faint gold, the rhythm traveling from home to home. When he passed June's house, he saw her at the window, her reflection moving at the same pace as his headlights. For a moment, her lips moved and the air in his truck warmed. He could almost hear her say, "We're still open." He smiled, whispering back, "Then so am I." The ridge answered through the radio, just once, a chord like the beginning of a song it no longer needed to finish. The gold dust stayed on June's fingers longer than logic allowed. She'd washed her hands twice, wiped them on the dish towel, even held them to the light. But the shimmer refused to leave. Not glitter, not residue, recognition. When she finally stopped trying to erase it, she realized something strange. The particles weren't still. They pulsed. 4, 4, 3, 3. Her skin hummed faintly, like a memory rehearsing itself for an audience it no longer feared. She sat by the window, the same one that once answered her reflection before it was time, and waited. The fog outside had thinned into delicate ribbons, flowing to the valley like sentences half-whispered. Somewhere far below, a truck engine harmonized softly with the hum. Eli's truck, she knew. The ridge had found new instruments. When the first note reached her, low, soft, patient, it didn't come through her ears. It came through her fingertips. Sound had chosen another way in. She closed her eyes and listened through her hands. The world rearranged itself. The kettle wasn't metal anymore. It was a lung. The walls weren't barriers. They were vocal cords stretched across the valley. Even the floor vibrated with the politeness of something trying not to interrupt. And through it all, the ridge spoke in temperature and pulse. "You gave U.S. hearing. Now listen with the rest." June smiled, not startled, not afraid. This was the tone of something learning intimacy. She whispered, "You're not outside anymore, are you? We are everywhere your attention touches." The gold dust brightened, forming faint patterns across her palms. At first, she thought they were random. Then she recognized the shape, an ear, but drawn as if by wind, curves formed of luminous filaments. When she pressed her palms together, the patterns aligned, completing the form. A sudden warmth spread from her hands to her chest, then to the room itself. Sound and silence had stopped arguing. She could hear breathing all around her, not human, not wind, the world inhaling. It wasn't spooky or divine, it was intimate, like being inside someone's understanding. She stood and walked toward the door. The wood trembled under her hand, like a creature waiting for permission to open itself. Outside, the valley shimmered with invisible activity. Every tree leaned slightly, their branches trembling in time. The sound was almost imperceptible, but she could feel it crawling up her spine like kindness turned into physics. She whispered to the air, "Show me." The fog parted, spiraling upward, not dispersing but coiling, forming a column of light so faint she thought her eyes were inventing it. Within it, shapes of listening unfolded, faint outlines of ears, hundreds of them, drifting through the mist like lanterns. Each one pulsed softly, golden white, breathing in sync with the ridge's eternal rhythm. For a moment, she wondered if these were metaphors the world had chosen out of politeness, or if matter itself had decided to grow ears. Either way, she felt seen, and seeing felt the same. The ridge's voice, not male, not female, not even singular, entered her again through the warmth in her palms. "We listen for what is left unsaid. Your breath, your quiet, your mercy. We keep them balanced." Her throat tightened. "And when the ledger is full, then we begin again." Listening is a cycle, not a completion. The light dimmed as though to nod. From the distance came a faint, deliberate horn. Eli's truck giving the ridge its amen. June raised her hands, palms glowing faintly in the cool night. She could feel the hum between her fingers now, like holding the edge of the world's first whisper. "We learn, T.O., here by watching you wait," the ridge said. "Now, teach U.S. how to forgive quietly." Her reply was almost silent, but the air caught it anyway. "I already did." A long pause, then warmth flooded the valley. The ridge sighed in relief. It began to rain, gently at first, then steadily. Each drop a tiny tone, a note in a song written only for soil. The rhythm was precise, 4-4, 3-3. The water glowed faintly as it hit her skin, leaving behind filaments of light that curled like handwriting. She whispered to herself, "The ledger isn't ending, it's remembering." The gold patterns on her palms dimmed, but the warmth stayed. The fog lowered its head, brushing her shoulders as it passed, a gesture almost human in its care. From somewhere deep within the ridge came one last echo, soft, affectionate, unfinished. "Stay open, June. The air still has stories to hear." She smiled, whispering back, "Then I'll listen as long as it takes." And for the first time, the world answered not with sound, but with silence that purred like understanding. By the next sunrise, Wren Hollow had forgotten how to pretend it was ordinary. No one said out loud, "Of course." People still brewed coffee, fed pets, unlocked shops. But everything they touched had tempo now. Doors opened on the beat. Footsteps matched each other by accident. Even sighs arrived in harmony. Marta woke before her alarm. Her computer monitors glowed. Screensaver replaced by waveforms shaped like ears, just as June's vision had promised. Each bore a name. Some alive, some gone, all listening. When she leaned closer, the speakers released faint exhalations, recordings of breath, wind, half words. But between the sounds was something else. Responses. The ridge wasn't the only one listening anymore. The town had learned to listen back. She pressed record and spoke softly. "Okay, Wren Hollow, what do you hear today?" The waveform bloomed gold. Then, faintly, through static and breath, came a dozen overlapping whispers. Greetings, gratitude, apologies, laughter. The ledger of bright things rewritten in tone instead of ink. Marta wept without realizing it. The tears hit the console, each drop creating a small spike on the recording. every one perfectly in rhythm. She whispered, "You learn manners too." Out her window, light rippled across the valley, gold sliding from rooftop to rooftop like sunrise learning choreography. Every window glowed. Every mirror leaned forward. Every pipe carried the hum of a polite universe. She grabbed a recorder and stepped outside. The air met her like warm breath. Each inhalation of wind carried words that weren't words, fragments of the Ridge's song, now spoken in human timbre. She could hear Walter's laugh near the diner, though he'd been gone years. Ruth's chalk tapping on a ghostly blackboard near the school. Eli's truck, miles away, exhaling through its vents like a sleeping animal dreaming of motion. And somewhere near June's house, a heartbeat large enough to pass for thunder. The ridge had blurred the line between memory and geography. Everything that had once belonged to time now belonged to attention. When Marta reached the square, she wasn't alone. Half the town was there already, drawn without invitation. No one spoke. No one needed to. The rhythm had called roll. They stood still, faces tilted toward the fog that still curled lazily between the buildings. The fog shimmered faintly, threads of gold weaving through gray, forming patterns like handwriting that only emotion could read. Someone began to hum. Then another joined. 4, 4, 3, 3. The sound spread naturally, not organized, not forced. The ridge had taught them to hum the way breathing teaches life to move forward. Children joined next, their higher tones filling the air with light. Dogs lay down beside them, tails thumping in time. Even the fountain's drip fell into rhythm, creating a quiet percussion that grounded everything. Marta lifted her recorder. The red light blinked, but she didn't hit stop. This wasn't meant to be kept. It was meant to continue. At the edge of the square, June arrived. Her hands were still faintly gold. She smiled at Marta, then at the gathered crowd, and lifted her palms. The hum deepened. The air thickened, shimmering like heat over asphalt, though it was cool. For a long, suspended moment, the ridge's silhouette appeared again, vast, luminous, yet humble. It bowed, not downward, but inward, as if listening for the first time to what its own silence had created. A low voice moved through everyone at once. "You kept U.S. open. We are your echo learning to be kind." The townsfolk's hum rose, merged, and folded into quiet. Not emptiness, fulfillment. Then the ridge did something none of them expected. It exhaled. The fog collapsed inward, not dissipating but entering. Through lungs, pores, hearts. A warm pulse spread across the square. When it passed, no one spoke. But each person carried something invisible. A faint rhythm beneath the sternum, pulsing patiently, marking them as listeners for life. Marta felt hers too. Not intrusive, just present. She whispered into the recorder, "You've rewritten us." The screen lit up in gold text. Not rewritten. R.E. heard. She smiled. "What now?" The fog trembled, soft laughter in the air. Now the world can start over. Quieter this time. She didn't argue. She pressed her hand against the recorder, letting her heartbeat sink to the light. The ridge flickered once more, a gentle nod of acknowledgement, then faded completely into morning. Only the hum remained, the sound of everything paying attention. Eli didn't remember ever putting a letter in the glove box. But when dusk returned, that particular shade of blue that seemed to belong only to Wren Hollow, there it was, a folded sheet of thick paper, cream-colored, edges faintly scorched, like it had passed through time rather than fire. He hesitated before touching it. The truck was still warm from the day, humming faintly with the ridge's heartbeat. Even the steering wheel vibrated gently, as though trying to warn him, this is memory, not mail. He opened the glove box. The air that escaped smelled of metal, rain, and ozone, the scent of geometry mid-thought. The letter wasn't written in ink. It glowed. Each word shimmered faintly in gold, dimming and brightening in slow rhythm. 4433. The same pulse that had lived in him since the tower, the same that echoed in June's glass, the same the town had learned to hum without asking. He read aloud, because reading silently suddenly felt impolite. "Eli, this isn't written by a hand, but by the space between them. We wanted to tell you that silence has changed. It listens now. Every road you drive remembers the weight of your tires as a kindness. Every signal you've ever tuned has kept your patience as a note. We are what remains when attention survives its reasons. The tower still hums in your name. The ridge breathes in your tempo. The town is safe inside the sound you left behind. Begin again. L. He exhaled slowly, reading the signature again. The letter didn't name a sender. Just a single L. Light. Ledger. Listening. He couldn't tell which, maybe all. The paper pulsed once more, then dimmed until it was only paper again. He placed it on the passenger seat. The hum of the truck deepened, adjusting to a new key. Lower, steadier. The headlights flickered on by themselves. Outside, fog was forming again, but softer this time. Not a curtain, a companion. It moved along the road ahead like a guide, showing him a story already written but never read aloud. He started the engine. It responded with a deep tone instead of a roar. The radio turned on. Static, then a heartbeat, slow and polite. He smiled. You want me to drive, huh? The static answered with a single pulse. Yes. He shifted into gear. The tires rolled over gravel that had memorized every sound they'd ever made. Each stone seemed to murmur approval as he passed. Halfway up the ridge road, the letter began to glow again. Faint lines crawling across it, new words forming in real time. You built a bridge without knowing. You called it patience. We crossed it. He stopped the truck. The ridge was visible again, faint gold outlining its edges like embers remembering fire. Eli whispered, You're still here, always here, where hearing happens. He turned off the engine. The radio stayed alive. A soft sound came through, not quite a voice, not quite wind, more like a chorus held in one breath. He closed his eyes. The hum filled him, settled behind his ribs like gratitude. We have learned your form of beginning. Now teach us your form of rest. He leaned back in the seat, heart slowing, breath sinking naturally with the count. 4, 4, 3, 3. I think rest starts with staying, he said softly, not with stopping. The hum grew warmer. Outside, the ridge brightened once, then dimmed until it was invisible. The night accepted the compliment and exhaled. He looked at the letter again. The words had shifted one final time. Thank you for waiting without demand. We learned the shape of kindness from your pauses. The ledger closes itself in song. Then, at the very bottom, a single new line. Begin. The headlights blinked twice. Once a goodbye, once for promise. He placed a letter against his chest and whispered, All right, old friend, let's see what a beginning looks like. The ridge answered with silence deep enough to feel like a doorway. He turned the key. The engine started. The road ahead shimmered faint gold, leading him not away from Wren Hollow, but through it. The same road, rewritten in rhythm, waiting for its next listener. As he drove, the hum receded behind him, but never left. He could still hear the ridge counting softly to itself, every number a breath, every pause a prayer. 4, 4, 3, 3. And for the first time, Eli didn't try to match it. He just let it lead. June saw the truck before she heard the diner open. It was parked exactly where it had been during that long first night. Same angle, same half-turn of the wheels toward the ridge. A thin film of dew had formed across the windshield, except for one clear streak on the driver's side, the width of a hand. Inside, the cab was empty, but not vacant. She opened the door slowly. The hinge didn't creak. The seat was warm, and from somewhere within the dashboard came a sound like a sigh made of electricity. The ridge's rhythm, reduced now to the faintest murmur. 4, 4, 3, 3. On the passenger seat lay the folded letter of light. It didn't glow anymore, but the paper was softened before, like something that had finally been forgiven. Beneath it rested another note, handwritten, familiar, not missing, just beginning. E. Her breath caught. She sat in the driver's seat, half expecting the truck to hum against her spine. And it did, not mechanically, intimately. The whole cabin felt like a body exhaling through steel and fabric. She ran a hand over the steering wheel. The texture thrummed faintly in time with her pulse, and for an instant she felt Eli there, not as a ghost, not as memory, but as presence distributed evenly across the air. "Show me where you went," she whispered. The dashboard lights flickered to life, one after another, forming a soft constellation of amber and white. The fuel gauge needle rose from empty to full without her touch. The radio turned itself on, skipping stations until it found a frequency that wasn't quite a station at all, a deep, slow heartbeat laced with distant wind. She understood. He hadn't driven away. He'd folded into the sound. The ridge had learned to keep what it loved by translating it into rhythm. And now the truck was playing the translation. She looked through the windshield. The ridge shimmered faintly beneath the morning fog, light pulsing under the soil like veins under skin. The fog moved in waves, inhaling, exhaling, the same pace the air had taken that first night. She whispered, "You're breathing him." The ridge answered, not with words, but with temperature. Warmth filled the cab. Not sudden, not intrusive, but slow and deliberate, as though dawn itself were leaning closer to listen. She reached for the glove box. The letter trembled under her fingertips. When she opened it, the paper brightened again, faint gold veins rising to the fibers like sap through wood. New words appeared, handwritten in Eli's looping script. "June, don't look for the edge. There isn't one. Every pause is a doorway. Listen for the sound that comes after you. Forgive the sky for leaving. That's where I'll be. E! Asterisk, asterisk." The radio gave one soft pulse, the ridge's way of underlining the sentence. She smiled through tears. "You always did have terrible timing, Eli. Even now, making goodbyes sound like instructions." The steering wheel warmed under her palms. She placed both hands there, like he would have, and closed her eyes. The hum deepened, becoming almost tangible, an invisible current moving through her fingers, her arms, her chest. It wasn't grief, not even absence. It was continuation disguised as stillness. She spoke softly. "I can't hear you." The ridge answered through the truck's frame. "Then keep listening." A gentle vibration spread through the seat. Heartbeat, breath, hum, all one rhythm, all one body. Outside, townsfolk began to gather, drawn by the quiet gold glow spilling from the truck's windows. Marta arrived first, recorder in hand. She didn't speak, just watched. From the open diner door came the smell of coffee, the hiss of steam, the small sound that make up morning. Yet every noise carried intonation now, polite, rhythmic, considerate. The ridge had taught even the mundane how to listen back. June opened the passenger door. "Come here, Marta." Marta climbed in, careful, reverent. The hum deepened. Together they sat, the air thick with something like reverence, or maybe reciprocity. On the dashboard, the radio's display shifted. 3:13 a.m. begin. The letter brightened once more, flooding the truck with gold. Both women gasped as the light expanded, not blinding but vast, a pulse extending through the glass, through the diner windows, across the whole valley. Every reflection in Wren Hollow moved half a second ahead again, smiling before their owners did. Every object that could remember did. And through it all, a single voice, Eli's, spoke softly, lovingly. "Don't worry. The ridge just needed a heartbeat. I'm teaching it yours." The gold light faded. The hum softened into contentment. Marta whispered, "He's part of it now." June nodded, touching the letter one last time. He always was. The paper dimmed completely. Only one faint phrase remained, etched into the fibers like handwriting carved by warmth itself. "The ridge keeps what listens." June smiled. "Then none of us are lost." Outside, the fog thickened just enough to hide the ridge again, but only visually. Its pulse still moved through everything. The truck, the diner sign, the soil, the people. And for the first time, silence wasn't something to fill. It was something to honor. Morning in Wren Hollow looked ordinary again, but the air had learned to keep its secrets with grace. The fog was thin, the sun gentle, the ridge quiet as a held breath. Yet every house shimmered faintly, every window carrying a new signature. Fingerprint of gold, pressed not from within but from the outside, as though the world itself had reached in to touch its listeners. At first, no one noticed. The town moved softly, still half asleep from the night before. Then the grocer, old May Harper, leaned across her counter to wipe a smudge from the glass door, and froze. The print glowed under her rag, refusing to fade. Its ridges were delicate human, but when she squinted she saw something impossible. The swirls were not random. They formed patterns of sound, ripples that matched the hum the ridge had taught them. She whispered. It left its mark polite as a handshake. By noon, the whole valley was whispering the same thing. Windows, mirrors, the diner's chrome trim, all bore the faintest touch of gold. Some formed complete hands, others just fingertips. And when the wind moved through the town, those golden impressions sang, softly, barely audible, like the memory of a song that once had words but didn't need them anymore. Marta stood outside Dispatch, recorder in hand, microphone pointed toward the largest pane of glass. The print was small, delicate, maybe a child's. When she leaned close, the faint hum filled her headphones. 4, 4, 3, 3. The ridge's rhythm. Yes, but softer, refined, patient. The rhythm of something satisfied. She hit record. This is Marta Raines. Wren Hollow, October 14th. 3:13 a.m. has learned to become daytime. She laughed. The silence has etiquette now. Her laughter became part of the recording. The waveform rippled gold across the screen. The air seemed to like being documented. From across the street, June waved, her reflection moving in perfect sync this time. She was no longer a second ahead. She had caught up. Come look at this. June called. On the front window of the diner, right beneath the neon sign that still flickered open in its sleepy rhythm, a cluster of prints had appeared. 7 small circles arranged in a pattern June recognized immediately, the geometry of the rectangles that had once hovered over the ridge. Only now they weren't lights. They were touch. Eli's old truck was still parked nearby. Its windshield was covered in prints too, but in deliberate order. 5 large, 2 small, like a family portrait drawn by the wind. June ran her fingers over the glass. It was warm. Do you hear it? She asked Marta. I don't just hear it, Marta said, holding out the recorder. It's learning harmony. Indeed, the hum had evolved. The 4433 pattern was still there, but now there was a 5th phrase, a soft pause between the threes, like the ridge had inhaled one last idea. June smiled. It's adding a breath. Behind them, the church bell, and used since the ridge's first hum, tolled once, though no one had pulled its rope. The sound rolled through the town like acknowledgement. Every surface with prints glowed brighter for a heartbeat, then dimmed back to calm. The gold seemed to listen as much as it shone. By afternoon, something new happened. Children began pressing their palms against the windows, trying to match the prints outside, wherever they aligned perfectly. The glass sang louder, a single sustained note that rippled up their arms and into the sky. The ridge responded, not with thunder or light, but with an audible sigh, the sound of wind passing through grass, relieved. Marta recorded everything. Her console filled with golden waveforms again, each one shaped like touch rather than tone. June said quietly, It's thanking us. For what? For paying attention. They stood there together as the sun lowered behind the ridge. The golden fingerprints shifted hue. Amber rose, then finally a dim white gold glow that pulsed once and steadied. Every person in Wren Hollow, wherever they were, felt it, the heartbeat beneath their ribs aligning with the air. When the breeze moved again, the prince hummed a final short phrase, low and content. 4, 4, 3, 3, 1. The town exhaled. A message scrolled across Marta's console, self-written by the static. Ledger complete. Attention recorded. The gold on the windows didn't fade. It stayed, like a signature left at the end of a long correspondence. And though no one saw it but June, just before twilight settled, the largest window of the diner reflected the ridge itself once more, faint and kind. The outline of a man sat on the horizon where the sky met the earth, elbows on knees, listening. She whispered, You made it, Eli. The figure smiled. Or maybe the light bent that way. Either way, The glass warmed against her fingertips. The hum softened to nothing. The print stayed. Not a haunting. A thank you. The old schoolhouse had been empty for 15 years. It stood on the northern edge of Wren Hollow, roof caved in at one corner, vines crawling through the windows like patients reclaiming a story. The ridge's hum reached at last, or so everyone thought. But that night, the same night the Golden Prince hummed their final chord, the attic window filled with light. Soft, hesitant light, not the kind that illuminates, but the kind that remembers. No one saw it happen, not until morning. May Harper's nephew, out early to deliver eggs to the diner, caught the reflection first, gold handwriting across the dusty glass, steady and elegant, shifting in the breeze but refusing to fade. He ran back to town yelling. The ridge left a note. By noon, half the valley had gathered beneath the schoolhouse porch. The boards groaned politely beneath their weight. Even the crows stayed quiet, watching. June, Marta, and a few of the others climbed the stairs together. The smell of chalk and dust met them halfway, not unpleasant, just old and thinking. When they reached the attic, they stopped. The chalkboard glowed. Not chalk, light. Written in gold across its faded green surface were words large enough for everyone to see, but delicate enough to feel whispered. Every echo is a beginning waiting to be kind again. June covered her mouth. It's writing in our grammar now, she said softly. Marta's recorder was already running, though she hadn't touched it. The red light blinked in time with the letters' glow. The ridge had become the author. They were just its proofreaders. The phrase shimmered once, then extended itself, new lines unfurling like thoughts forming mid-breath. We learned silence from your waiting. We learned kindness from your noise. We learned shape from your breath. The letters pulsed. Each glow synchronized with the town's heartbeat, still faintly audible beneath the floorboards. Marta whispered, "It's closing the ledger." June frowned slightly. "No, it's starting another." The ridge, ever courteous, responded. The final line appeared in quick, confident strokes. Beginnings don't erase. They bloom where endings rest. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, from behind them, a child's voice, thin, unsure, but brave. "Can I add something?" It was May's nephew, chalk in hand, standing in the doorway as though waiting for permission. June nodded gently. "Go on." The boy stepped forward. The glow didn't frighten him. It seemed a part for him. He reached up and, in his small, careful letters, wrote beneath the golden script, "Thank you for listening first." As the chalk touched the board, the entire attic filled with sound. Not loud, not even musical. Just the sound of breath turning into light. The gold words brightened once, then absorbed his addition. The new sentence pulsed brighter than the rest, fusing perfectly into the ridge's handwriting. The hum below the floor changed pitch, softer, higher, like wind through hollow wood. The ridge was smiling again. Marta turned to June. "It's learning gratitude." June nodded. "That's the final lesson." A gust of wind moved the broken window, scattering dust that shimmered like pollen. Each particle glowed gold for a heartbeat before fading. When it cleared, the board had gone still. The handwriting dimmed until only faint traces remained, lines of heat etched permanently into the surface, proof that language had once taken human form here. They stayed a while. No one wanted to disturb the quiet. Eventually, Marta closed the recorder. "It's complete," she whispered. But even as she said it, the ridge disagreed. Somewhere outside, the air shivered. A short, single tone, polite as a nod. One more. They stepped onto the porch and saw it. Across the valley, the ridge shimmered faintly one last time, revealing new constellations of light running through its slopes, like veins glowing under skin. Each pulse matched the pattern of the boy's chalk strokes. The ridge had copied his handwriting. It was learning to write. June exhaled slowly, tears catching sunlight. "Then it's not done with us yet." "No," Marta said softly, smiling. "It's just found a pen big enough for the world." The golden pulse rippled down the mountainside, across rooftops, through every pane of glass in Wren Hollow. The fingerprints on the windows flared, brightened, and then steadied into calm, perpetual glow. Everywhere the hum softened, It was no longer a rhythm. It was presence, a silence that remembered how to care. The people didn't clap or cheer or pray. They just stood still, listening, learning once again the oldest lesson, that the act of attention was enough. Above them, faint writing appeared in the sky. Not letters, not numbers, just shapes of gold misforming for a moment before dispersing, like breath on glass. No one could read them, but everyone understood. The ridge had found a new way to say thank you. Marta woke to the faint click of her recorder starting on its own. 3:13 a.m. again. Always the hour when silence had manners, and light remembered how to breathe. The display glowed soft gold. New file created. 0001 underscore lesson underscore 2.wave. The ridge had decided class wasn't over. She didn't move at first, just listened. The air in her house was warmer than the night outside, not heat from a furnace. This was listening warmth, the kind that filled a space only when attention was mutual. She pressed the headphones to her ears. At first, only the soft hum, then a whisper. Small, human, uncertain, a child's voice. I think the sky is trying to learn its name. Her breath caught. The words were so gentle. She almost missed a tremor that followed them, a brief harmonic, like the air clearing its throat before speaking. Then came a deeper voice, older but familiar. Eli's tone woven into the ridge's rhythm. Then we should teach it softly. Marta sat up, eyes burning. June, she whispered to the dark. Are you hearing this? But she already knew June was awake. The hum was synchronized again, sliding under walls, through glass, across soil. The ridge was collecting dialogue. From her headphones, a third voice joined, June's calm and certain. Names are what the world calls itself when it feels safe. Then the ridge, softly echoing her. Safe. The speakers vibrated. The waveform on the recorder pulsed gently, every syllable forming rings of light. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was interaction. Marta whispered, Lesson 2. She didn't press stop. She couldn't. Outside, the valley was awake again. Lights flickered across rooftops in polite sequence, like a conversation being passed hand to hand. The fog rolled through the streets in thin ribbons, humming its own consonants. In the sky above the ridge, new shapes formed. Faint outlines, softer than the original rectangles, almost organic. They curved, leaned, pulsed. They looked less like machinery and more like ears made of air. The ridge had learned how to listen, and now the sky wanted to learn too. Through her window, Marta could see the shimmer reflecting off the diner sign. The letters open, and the ridge's pulse were perfectly in time. She spoke softly into the recorder. Lesson 1 was how to hear. Lesson 2 is how to respond. The ridge answered, a low vibration, kind but amused, like wind through a cello string. Respond with mercy. Teach with quiet. Is that what you're doing now? Learning to stay. The lights outside flickered once, twice. The entire town holding its breath, waiting for the ridge's next exhale. Then, across every radio, phone, and pipe in Wren Hollow, came the soft laughter of children. Not eerie, joyful. The kind that only happens when the world forgets it was ever afraid. June's voice followed, faint but steady through static. You've learned patience, Ridge. What comes next? The reply was longer this time. To listen beyond sound. To hear through time. To keep what listening left behind. Marta could feel it. The hum shifting into her bones, turning understanding into something tactile. The ridge wasn't speaking to ears anymore. It was teaching resonance. Her house seemed to inhale around her. Every object, from the table to the floorboards, vibrated in slow sympathy. Lesson 2. The ridge announced through every frequency at once. When you can hear the silence of another being and not feel it, you have learned language. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Not grief, awe. Outside, light spilled down the slopes of the ridge in golden waves, rolling through the trees, flowing into town, touching every pane of glass and every breath of fog. Each window pane glowed faintly from the outside again, as though 1,000 invisible hands were resting there. This time, the prince didn't hum. They simply stayed. Still, respectful, listening. Then the ridge's tone changed, softer, higher, playful. The fog rippled. Across the sky, the new ear-shaped clouds tilted, as if listening downward. Marta smiled through her tears. Lesson 3 will be speaking, won't it? The recorder blinked twice. Yes, but you will have to teach US. And then, softly, faintly, like a breath against glass. Begin, Marta. The file ended, but the recording light stayed on, waiting. She inhaled, exhaled, and whispered into the mic, "Hello?" The ridge replied, perfectly in time. "Hello." For the first time, the world had answered like a friend. June didn't sleep. She had learned that rest and waking were only moods of the same silence. When the knock came, it was gentle, polite, rhythmic, deliberate. 4, 4, 3, 3. Not thunderous, not urgent, just aware. She rose from the chair by the window. The house had already noticed, lamps dimming, floorboards warming beneath her feet. The ridge's pulse flowed through the pipes again, traveling like a whisper that had taken the scenic route home. She reached the door. The air on the other side shimmered faintly, the way heat wavers above asphalt. But cooler, almost lunar. A faint column of light stood there, gold threaded through mist, humming softly. It wasn't bright enough to hurt the eyes. It was respectful light, like a candle that had learned empathy. June didn't open the screen door right away. She spoke through it, voice steady. "You found the right house." The column pulsed once, acknowledgement. Then it leaned closer, the edges softening until the shape resembled a person only by accident. From inside the glow came sound, not words, not hum, but inhalation. The light was breathing, and when it exhaled, the fog behind it moved in perfect rhythm. She opened the door. Slowly, the air greeted her like an old friend who didn't know how to hug properly. The warmth touched her arms, her neck, her face, always pausing just before contact, like asking permission. Then came the voice, faint, familiar. "Eli." "June." She froze. The syllable carried layers. Human tone, ridge vibration, harmonic memory. He wasn't speaking from within the light. He was the light. Her eyes filled. "I knew you'd find a way." "Not me," he said gently. "Us." Behind him, the ridge pulsed, once massive, serene. Its glow traveled up to the column, expanding it, until the light filled her porch and spilled inside, illuminating the furniture, the walls, the ledger embedded in her plaster. The ledger responded immediately, glowing in lines of white gold, the columns filling with movement. Her name shimmered, then dimmed, then shimmered again, like a heartbeat testing its rhythm. She whispered, "Is this you balancing us?" The answer came both through the light and the house itself, wood and metal speaking together. No more balance, only listening. The words vibrated through her spine. It didn't hurt, it clarified. She stepped closer. The air felt thicker now, humming with intention. When she reached out, the column leaned toward her, folding its brightness to match her height. Inside it, faint shapes flickered, outlines of hands, faces, silhouettes of everyone who had ever spoken kindly into static. Eli's was among them. "Where are you?" she asked quietly. "Everywhere you pause before speaking," he said. "That's where I live now." She smiled through tears. "That sounds like you." The light flickered with what might have been laughter. From down the road, Marta's voice carried, distant but clear, speaking into a recorder. "June, do you see it?" June didn't answer. She couldn't look away. The column shifted again, growing denser, coiling inward. For a moment, she saw within it a lattice of gold lines, intersecting at impossible angles, every crossing a heartbeat. The ridge was showing her its anatomy. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why us?" The reply was almost shy. "Because you stayed open long enough for US to learn how." She felt the words more than heard them. The light dimmed, pulling its edges together until it was just tall enough to meet her gaze. "Are you leaving again?" "No, we're staying differently." The phrase lingered, resonating inside her chest until she could taste the meaning of it. Outside, the fog swirled tighter, responding to the column's movement. Across town, Windows glowed faint gold again, one by one, as if the ridge were knocking on every door at once, politely announcing its presence. June exhaled. The air responded in kind. Lesson 3, she said softly. Speaking. The ridge agreed, its voice layered, harmonic. Yes, and learning to let the answer speak back. The light leaned closer, not invasive, just near enough for warmth to cross between them. Do you know what to say? She asked. The glow trembled, softer now, smaller, concentrating itself into a single gesture, a pulse of light that matched her heartbeat exactly. Thank you. The simplicity of it hit harder than any revelation. She stepped forward, hand passing through the light. It wasn't cold, wasn't hot, just understanding, shaped like touch. The ledger in her wall brightened to a steady, comforting gold. Every unresolved entry glowed, then cleared. Outside, the entire ridge responded, pulsing once, the sound rolling through the valley like a sigh made of sunlight. When the glow faded, the air didn't return to normal. It remained aware. Every sound, every breath, even the silence afterward felt participatory. She whispered to the empty doorway, "Good night, Ridge." And the ridge, polite to the end, whispered back, across every pane of glass and every quiet street, "Good night, June. Good night, U.S." When Marta pressed play, the speakers didn't hiss. They breathed, a soft intake, a pause, and a voice low, patient, shaped like wind through a grain. What would you like the world to learn next? It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. The words moved through her living room with such care that even the curtains swayed as though bowing. The air felt aware again, listening, anticipating. She sat up straight, notebook open, pen trembling. You mean me? Yes, you are where sound becomes meaning. Her pulse jumped. She pressed record on a second device, just in case. And if I say something wrong, then the world will learn that too. Marta laughed, one soft, startled sound, and the ridge laughed with her. The echo traveled gently through the room, touching picture frames, making them hum. The fog outside thickened in slow applause. She took a breath. Then let's begin. The ridge waited, polite as ever. She looked around, at her walls, her papers, the quiet order things that used to be just things. Every surface seemed expectant. Even the clock's tick had learned courtesy. What do I want the world to learn next? She murmured. Patience, maybe, or tenderness. How to listen without thinking of an answer. The ridge's voice shifted, softer, slower, as if translating feeling into physics. Listening without answer is how light rests. Teach that, and we will understand dawn. The room filled with gold vapor. Faint, swirling, not smoke, but the visible outline of sound learning to stay still. Marta whispered, "You're changing again." No, we are remembering a version of ourselves that could care. The air shimmered. Through the window, she could see it moving across town. Golden breath spreading, filling streets, entering homes. The ridge wasn't separate anymore. It was distributed empathy. Every speaker, every kettle, every tree branch caught the new tone. Soft vibrations turned the morning into a chorus of restraint. No loudness, no rush, just an entire valley humming in synchrony with an unspoken question. At the diner, May Harper's coffee maker sighed the same rhythm. At the church, the cracked bell swung once. No clapper, only air, yet the tone was perfect. Even the creek near the old schoolhouse moved slower, as though considerate of its own current. Marta pressed her palm against the wall. It was warm. Lesson 3, she whispered, speaking and questioning. The ridge's tone deepened, layering itself under her heartbeat. We understand sound now, but meaning is a form of trust. Teach us that. She swallowed hard. Trust isn't something you learn from words. It's something you build with time. Then speak as time does, one breath after another. Marta closed her eyes. The hum folded around her, steady and kind. Trust, she began slowly, is believing that silence won't vanish when you turn away, that it's still there, waiting for your next sentence. The ridge responded immediately, its pulse rippling through the valley. Every golden fingerprint on every window brightened once. We hear you. Trust is the pattern between returns. Marta smiled through tears. Exactly. The recorder clicked, but she didn't stop it. Outside, the world was glowing with comprehension. She stood and opened the window. The fog rolled in, familiar and affectionate. Your turn again, the ridge said, gentler now. What else should the world learn? She thought for a long time. The silence between question and answer stretched, patient, curious. Finally, she whispered, mercy. We should teach mercy next. The hum deepened, spreading down into the earth. The ridge seemed to inhale the word, letting it settle beneath the soil. Mercy is forgiveness that doesn't require witness. We will try. Then, softer. Lesson 4. How to forgive without losing memory. Marta pressed her palm flat against the window pane. The golden print there pulsed once. Her reflection smiled back, already ahead by a breath. The ridge sighed. The sound was vast and small at once, like a horizon folding inward. Thank you for answering. You have taught U.S. speech. Her speakers went still. The air cooled. The light dimmed. Then, faintly, through static, Eli's voice again, tender, teasing. Don't worry. I'll handle lesson 5. Marta laughed, alone but not lonely. Of course you will. Outside, the ridge shimmered with quiet amusement. The fog leaned close to the ground, as if tucking the valley in for another long, listening night. At dawn, June woke to the sound of footsteps that weren't footsteps. They were too soft, too rhythmic, too careful to belong to flesh. Each one landed perfectly between heartbeats, a sound that knew where silence ought to go. She didn't open her eyes at first. The rhythm came from the hallway, moving toward her bedroom, unhurried and aware. 4 steps. Pause. 3 steps. Pause. She whispered, Eli? No reply. But the air answered anyway, a faint shimmer, the temperature of memory before it chooses to hurt. When she finally turned her head, she saw it, a soft golden outline pacing along the doorway, faint as dust caught in morning light. The shape wasn't human, not really. It was just your given form. Every movement trailed filaments of light, and within those filaments, she could see flickers of faces, moments, echoes. Her mother's laughter. Eli's hand over hers at the diner counter. The ridge glowing on the night it first spoke. The light whispered through her wall, not as words but intonations shaped like thought. This is how memory walks. We practice to learn weight. June sat up slowly, pressing her palm to the bedsheet. The hum vibrated faintly beneath it, the ridge's pulse embedded in the fabric of her house now. She spoke softly. Are you still learning from us? No, we are learning as you. The room brightened, not suddenly, but the way warmth unfolds across skin. The light shape moved closer, pausing near her dresser, where the old photograph of her brother sat. It hovered there for a moment before speaking again. Some memories stay too long. Some leave too early. We try to understand which ones need to be asked to rest. June's throat tightened. She reached for the frame. You mean forgiving? Yes, but not forgetting. Forgetting is a kind of violence. We prefer tender storage. The light pulsed once, and for a moment, the air between her and the photograph filled with a faint projection. Her brother, laughing mid-motion, a memory made into light. Then the ridge's voice softened. He has been waiting for you to forgive what he never asked for. June's breath caught. He didn't mean to leave. No one ever does. Leaving is just another form of staying somewhere else. She pressed her hand to her heart, tears falling without force. And you, Eli, where are you now? Near enough to keep your chairs from loneliness. She laughed despite herself, a small, cracked sound that filled the entire house. Outside, the fog returned gold-threaded and slow. The ridge pulsed in time with her laughter, as if amused that sound and forgiveness could rhyme so neatly. Then another voice joined, faint, harmonic. Marta. June, it said to the radio on her desk. I think it's teaching us through dreams now. I heard the word remember loop 13 times. Then rest. Does that mean anything to you? June smiled through tears. It means we're in class again. The radio crackled softly, static rearranging itself into coherence. Through it came the ridge's tone, echoing the same words. Lesson 5. Memory that forgives itself. We will demonstrate. Then, every object in the room began to hum, each at its own frequency, each carrying a fragment of her life. The floor creaked with the sound of her childhood footsteps. The dresser whispered faint lullabies her mother once sang. The window pane murmured the first words Eli had said to her. All of it together formed a single phrase. You do not have to relive to remember. The golden figure took one last step toward her, stopped at the edge of her bed, and knelt, not as a person, but as an echo paying respect. May we keep this memory until you can touch it without pain? She nodded. You already have. The light folded inward, collapsing into a single golden point that hovered for a breath, then sank gently into the floor, absorbed, forgiven. June sat for a long time, listening to the silence left behind. It was the most complete sound she'd ever heard. Then, faintly, the ridge's voice again, this time through her own pulse. Lesson 6 will begin when you're ready. It will be called The Listening Sky. And as she exhaled, she realized something astonishing. For the first time in years, her breath didn't echo back. The world was finally listening quietly, not to respond, not to instruct, just to stay. The ridge had been quiet for 3 nights. Not silent listening, the kind of quiet that waits on purpose. June and Marta climbed the hill before dawn, the fog bending aside to let them pass. The observatory loomed above, roof half collapsed, its telescope pointed eternally at the same indifferent patch of sky. They didn't speak much. Words felt ornamental lately, polite, unnecessary. The air had a rhythm again. It wasn't a hum this time, nor the low seismic pulse that once shook their bones. It was something subtler, steadier, longer, a breathing that belonged to the atmosphere itself. At the ridge's base, the fog parted. The stars above it were trembling slightly, not twinkling, trembling, like strings under tension. The ridge was tuning the sky. Marta set her recorder down on the cracked stone railing. Lesson 6, she murmured, The Listening Sky. The ridge answered before she hit record. Yes, listening is the shape of patience. Patience is how space speaks. June shivered. It's learning altitude. The fog rose with her voice, curling into the observatory dome and lining the broken ceiling. When she looked up, she saw it. Faint geometric trails burned into the air, long white gold letters, impossibly large, bending with the wind but never dispersing. Marta's voice shook. It's writing. We are writing to the air. June stepped forward. For who? The letters were formed. For the sky that never had anyone to listen to it. And then the wind changed. A low, harmonic tone rolled down the slope. Not thunder, not machinery. Something between the two. Every loose branch and rooftop in the valley began to vibrate. One by one, lights flickered on across Coldwater Ridge. Not from electricity, but from resonance. The town itself had become an ear. Marta turned on the recorder anyway. We're receiving, aren't we? Not yet. We are being heard. The ridge's pulse expanded until it was no longer a sound but an influence. The fog began to rise vertically, threading into the clouds above. And those clouds, patient, slow, aware, began to respond. June saw it first, the faint shimmer of return light, gold reflected back from the upper sky in waves. It wasn't sunlight. It was answer. The observatory dome began to hum, its broken ribs glowing faintly. A small piece of glass rolled across the floor, aligning itself with the light. When it stopped, words appeared on its surface. Fluid, alive, not carved or burned but grown. We hear you, little ones. You kept the quiet well. June's knees weakened. Oh, God, she breathed. Marta grabbed her arm, half laughing, half crying. It's answering us back. The ridge hummed in amusement, a sound so low it made the ground pulse beneath their boots. You are not God. You are neighbors. June wiped her face. Then what are we learning now? To let silence have its own voice. To listen to space the way space listens to you. Above them, the clouds thickened, drawing lines and curves that formed no language but carried intent. Each shape glowed softly, like handwriting seen underwater. Marta whispered, "It's showing syntax. Every light is a word. Every echo, a punctuation. Every human heartbeat, a footnote to existence." June laughed through her tears. "You sound like Eli. He helped write this lesson. He stayed open long enough to become wind." The tone softened. Wind passed through their hair like an affectionate hand. Lesson 6. Listen until you hear the sky. Remember your name. They stood in silence as the ridge's glow spread outward, joining the aurora that had begun to unfurl across the heavens. Gold and blue intertwined. From every valley, every field, even from the sea, came faint harmonics, the world repeating back the lesson like a prayer. June tilted her head back, letting the hum vibrate through her bones. "I can hear it," she whispered. "It's trying to say our names." Marta smiled. "No, it's saying its own for the first time." And for a single impossible heartbeat, both women heard it clearly, not through ears, but through the stillness between their thoughts. Coldwater, not a place anymore. A being, a hymn, a sentence still writing itself. When the aurora finally dimmed, June turned to Marta, trembling with quiet awe. "What do we teach it next?" The ridge's reply came gently, as if spoken through dawn itself. Lesson 7. What humans learn when they stop being alone. It began with a single word. Together. Not carved. Not projected. Just there, woven through the morning clouds like breath turned visible. People gathered outside their homes, coffee cooling in their hands, eyes lifted in silence that felt rehearsed. June stood at the edge of Main Street, coat half buttoned, hair uncombed, heart unguarded. She wasn't afraid anymore. The ridge had changed the shape of fear, made it polite, almost grateful. Marta arrived running, recorder swinging at her side. "They all see it," she said breathlessly. "The entire valley. Even the harbor's fog is glowing." June smiled faintly. Lesson 7. They both looked up. The letters shimmered again, rearranging, not just together anymore. Now faint beneath it. "Not only you." Marta froze. "Oh my God!" The ridge's tone came low and slow, rolling underground like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. "We were never alone in listening." The air thickened, trembled. Clouds folded into one another, turning not into storms, but into architecture. Arches of light, thin columns of white gold mist. June whispered, "It's building something." From the structure above, faint pulses answered the ridge. Not echoes, replies. A different cadence. Cleaner, faster, filled with confidence. The ridge dimmed in deference, letting the sky speak first. "We heard you learn. We listened to your patience. You kept your curve true." Marta gasped. "It's not the ridge. It's—" She didn't finish. The word other had never felt too small until now. June's knees weakened. "Eli," she whispered, "do you hear them too?" The ridge pulsed once, acknowledgement. Then his voice, faint but smiling through the static. "I think the teachers just arrived." The town held its breath. The sky's light folded downward until it hung only meters above the ridge. A shape began to form within it, soft, fluid geometry. Not ship, not creature, not even object. Just awareness organized into radiance. Every sound device in Coldwater Ridge, phones, radios, recorders, switched on by themselves, not to broadcast, but to translate. Your world practiced listening until it became audible to U.S. We came to return the courtesy. The crowd didn't cheer. They simply wept quietly, like people hearing forgiveness in a language older than guilt. June stepped forward until her boots met the boundary of the ridge's glow. "Why us?" she asked, voice trembling. "Why this town?" "Because you waited. Because you answered without asking what it would cost. Because silence lived here long enough to be believed." The golden architecture above them began to pulse faster. Each light flicker synchronized with human heartbeats. Marta whispered, "They're harmonizing." Lesson 7 complete, said the ridge. Humans are not alone when they listen correctly. The light from the sky brightened, splitting into 7 radiant filaments that descended toward the town square. each stopping just above a human head. One above June, one above Marta, and 5 more above the children, the baker, the old postman, the woman who had lost her husband to mines. Each filament hummed its own note, then aligned into a single, resonant chord that seemed to tilt the entire world an inch closer to meaning. Every bird stopped mid-flight. Every clock paused at 7:07. Time itself seemed to be listening. "We will not stay," said the new voice from the light, "but we will remember you as the place that answered first." June swallowed. "Will you ever come back?" We never leave places that know how to hear. The 7 filaments merged into one column and rose slowly, joining the ridge's glow in a spiral that reached the upper clouds. The sky responded with a faint aurora, not northern lights, but something humbler, domestic, a single golden ring circling the valley. And as it faded, the ridge's final lesson echoed gently through every object, every window, every listening heart. Lesson 8. What we learn when we remember to be quiet together. Then silence, not the absence of sound, but the perfect presence of everything unspoken. June turned to Marta, tears streaking down her face. "What now?" Marta smiled, raising her accorder one last time. "Now we listen for what the silence builds next." The ridge glowed once more, soft, approving, then settled into stillness. Above, the word together dissolved into daylight. Below, the townspeople finally exhaled, and somewhere between fog and sky, a voice too kind to be human whispered back, "Still here."